Chapter 844. 2.5 hours later, the aftermath of the thermonuclear explosion made the entire Fallujah experience a thrilling baptism. When the hot wind completely passed, many fanatical religious believers began to walk on the streets, trying to figure out what happened. When they learned that an American army of tens of thousands that wanted to capture the city had been annihilated halfway, they immediately burst into earth-shattering cheers and went door to door to spread the good news. As a gathering place for Sunni Muslims, almost 80% of the people here were loyal supporters of Zarqawi. Some even compared him to the Muslim world hero who successfully reclaimed the holy city of Jerusalem from the Christians in the Middle Ages, Saladin. But no one knew that at this moment, in the basement of a house in Fallujah, two people were ridiculing Zarqawi in a slightly contemptuous tone and deciding his fate. See, I'm right? Those UA people don't have the courage to die with the entire world. They're like a group of greedy hyenas. Only when they have an absolute advantage will they dare to fight with their enemies. If the leader of the Soviet Union who dealt with the Cuban Missile Crisis wasn't the idiotic Khrushchev, the UA people wouldn't have any advantage. Zhang Cheng sneered and commented while appreciating the negotiation process that he had secretly filmed. Just as he expected, the UA people were no different from other countries in the face of nuclear deterrence. They all chose one word: fear. The reason was simple. The intelligence organization established by Leonid, in a strict sense, wasn't a country. There was no territory to defend and no people to protect. They were like a group of ghosts hiding around the world, secretly carrying out all kinds of espionage operations. In short, they didn't have too many scruples. To deal with such a group of people, nuclear deterrence in the ordinary sense wouldn't have any effect at all, because they didn't know where to bomb when they launched a counterattack. What was more terrifying was that they could also send thermonuclear warheads in the detonated state to any corner of the world. This also meant that unless the UA wanted to drag all the countries in the world, including themselves, down with them, they couldn't come up with any good countermeasures. Unless they really had the courage to detonate nuclear warheads, what else could they do? Of course, in exchange, Zarqawi, who launched this attack, had to die. He would become a scapegoat for the entire incident and shoulder all the blame. Zhang Cheng wasn't worried at all about whether the UA and the CIA would fulfill their promises in the future. He believed that after these fellows suffered a loss, they would definitely do their best to gather information. Before they gather enough information, they would definitely not act rashly. You're right. Nuclear flattening. Nuclear flattening. Without the core, there would be no peace. But I don't think the Americans chose to back down this time out of cowardice. On the contrary, they made the decision after careful consideration. If there are no accidents, it won't be long before all the powerful countries in the world receive our information. Leonid rubbed his chin and reminded him meaningfully. What does it matter? Which country in the world would dare to do that? Zhang Cheng curled his lips in disdain. Someone once said that the greatest use of nuclear weapons is to place them on the launcher. Once they are launched, they are nothing more than a powerful bomb. But I don't agree with this view. It is important to place nuclear weapons on the launcher, but it is more important to let everyone understand that you have the courage to press the launch button. Sometimes it is a good choice to use it once in a while to give those who are ready to make a move a boost. Leonid nodded in agreement. Yes, through this negotiation, I have fully realized this point. Oh, yes, the UA military requires us to provide the exact location of Zarqawi's hiding place within 5 days. Don't worry, we don't need to do this by ourselves. Do you still remember Zarqawi's deputies? Give them a little hint, and then wait patiently. You have to understand that religious fanaticism is only useful for those stupid civilians. Once they climb to a high enough position, they will soon understand that money and power are everything. When he said this, Zhang Cheng didn't hide his disgust for these religious extremists at all. In his opinion, any religion with a strong exclusionary nature, especially the most extreme monotheistic religions, was a standard brainwashing cult. Anyone who believed in these religions, if extremely smart people encountered problems that they couldn't explain, would place their hopes on an omniscient and omnipotent creator, or extremely stupid and unreasonable idiots. The former might be interested in debating with you and try to find some answers, but the latter would never talk nonsense with you. They would only emphasize the content recorded in the scriptures and wouldn't accept any rebuttal or questioning. Hey, I understand now. You want these guys to stage a show of betrayal, and killing each other. Leonid was so smart that he instantly realized the benefits of doing so. First of all, they didn't want to offend the terrorists that were all over this land. Second, even if Zarqawi died, they could continue to sell weapons and ammunition to the new leader and buy oil and minerals at a low price. Last but not least, they could maintain a sense of mystery and reduce the chances of the organization being infiltrated by the enemy. Okay, go to your thing. Remember, don't touch Zarqawi for the next 2 days. I need him to help find a place. Zhang Cheng raised his hand and opened a portal to the Pacific base. As you wish. Leonid bowed deeply with one hand on his chest. But just as he turned around and was about to step through the portal, he suddenly stopped and asked in an uncertain tone, "What do we do with this secretly filmed video of the negotiation? Do we really want to put on the internet and slap the UA government in the face?" Be patient. After the UA sells our information to other intelligence organizations, you can send this video to the internet. Don't forget, I said before that this time, I want to show the humbleness and weakness of the UA to the whole world. As a man, you have to do what you say. Zhang Cheng's eyes flashed with malice. He could imagine how violent the situation of the whole world would be after this content was released, especially those countries that already had nuclear weapons or were actively preparing to have nuclear weapons. They would be more determined to research and develop more powerful nuclear weapons and use nuclear blackmail to make the UA retreat. When a global order led by the UA began to collapse, the whole world would become chaotic, and the underground world would also be affected to a certain extent. At that time, no matter how terrible things were, no one would stand up to stop or interfere. That's right. Zhang Cheng's real purpose was to make the whole human society fall into division and civil strife. Chapter 845. The Euphrates River was the birthplace of ancient cultures in southern Mesopotamia from the Sumerian to the Abbasid era. The earliest civilization of mankind was built and developed slowly with it as the center. Right now, the river was flowing as usual, slowly passing through the city of Fallujah and bringing precious water to this important city. Standing on a bridge, Zhang Cheng looked down at the flowing river and asked expressionlessly, "Are you sure that the thing I'm looking for is under the water? At the bottom of the river?" "Yes. According to the map, there should be a temple from the ancient Babylonian era here, but the river seemed to have changed, so it was completely submerged and finally sunk to the bottom of the river. Right now, unless we cut off the river, we can't excavate at all." A very old scholar quickly gave an affirmative answer. Needless to say, in the land of the Middle East, there were countless splendid civilizations, including Sumerian, Babylonian, and Assyrian. They were both ancient and full of mystery, far surpassing the origins of most human civilizations in the world. But now, most of the ruins had disappeared and were replaced by wars, killings, hatred, and countless mosques. Thinking of this, Zhang Cheng couldn't help but sigh and ordered Yelena behind him. "Give them money, then let them go." "Are you sure?" Yelena frowned subconsciously. Although she didn't know what her boss was looking for, her first reaction as a spy was to kill them to ensure that the information wouldn't leak out. No need. Also, you better take your people and leave this area as soon as possible. Otherwise, if something happens later, I can't guarantee your safety." Zhang Cheng clearly didn't intend to explain too much and only gave a small hint. "Understood. I'll take my people and retreat immediately." Yelena wasn't a fool. She immediately realized that something big was going to happen. Without saying anything, she took out bundles of US dollars from her bag and distributed them to the busy experts and professors. Although more than 90% of these Sunni militants were anti-American, they didn't reject the most produced commodity in the US dollars. Of course, other than US dollars, there were also various weapons and ammunition produced in the US. In fact, Just like Professor Wong's law of fragrances, most of the so-called boycotts were just for show. They had no chance of success. The reason was simple. The value of an item was determined by the market, which was the buyer. More than 80% of the buyers didn't care about the place of production, but the quality and comprehensive price of the item. Watching everyone gradually disappear at the end of the road, Zhang Cheng took a deep breath and cast an underwater breathing spell on himself before jumping off the bridge. Splash! Accompanied by splashes, he finally reached the bottom of the river and began to look around for suspicious places. A small fork on a map often meant that the river was more than 10 kilometers long. What's more, the Euphrates River was not a small river, but a super large river with a length of more than 2,800 kilometers. It could almost be said to be the lifeline of the Middle East. In addition, there were all kinds of creatures and algae in the water. Trying to find a temple that had been completely submerged thousands of years ago was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Fortunately, Zhang Cheng could confirm the approximate location of the river, and that was the distance between the city of Fallujah and the city. In order to speed up the exploration, he uses almost unlimited magic power to create thousands of mathematical Olympiad minions. Although these minions didn't have any intelligence, they were very sensitive to energy. Even the slightest bit of energy could attract their attention. With the help of the mathematical Olympiad's minions, Zhang Cheng found a very suspicious place in about 20 minutes. It was located in the middle of the city. Above it was the largest city in Fallujah, Rishala. The riverbed didn't look like anything, but in fact, there was an indescribable mysterious energy constantly being released from the bottom of the riverbed. The surrounding aquatic creatures didn't dare to get close. When a grass carp passed by, it seemed to have encountered a mysterious, invisible force field. It swung its tail in a big circle. Looks like it's here, Zhang Cheng thought to himself. However, he wasn't in a hurry to act. Instead, he carefully checked the surroundings. After confirming that there weren't any defenses or traps, he stabbed the supreme god artifact into the mud. After a short while, a large amount of mud, clay, and gravel were washed away by the strong current. Slowly, the hidden building was revealed. To be more precise, it was a temple used to worship an unknown god. In the center of the temple, there was a circular pillar made of bronze. It looked as if it was brand new. It didn't rust, nor did it grow any algae or shells under the baptism of the river. It emitted a golden glow. At the top of the pillar, there was a rectangular groove. The size of it matched the stone slab he obtained earlier. Obviously, this was the entrance to the second seal. Mainly, by embedding the cuneiform stone slab, one would be able to enter the ancient seals set by the ancient gods of the Two Rivers Basin and directly face the powerful guards. Master, are you planning to go in alone? The supreme god artifact suddenly asked through the spiritual link. Why not? Do you think that I can't beat a mere guard? Zhang Cheng frowned and asked in return. No, what I mean is, why don't you call Adam over? He can help analyze the battle so that we can have a rough estimate of the sleeping gods. The supreme god artifact took the initiative to explain. Faced with this tempting suggestion, Zhang Cheng hesitated for a moment. Then, he immediately shook his head and refused. There's no need for that. I'm not stupid enough to open more than 4 seals and awaken all the sleeping gods before I'm powerful enough. My plan is to open 1 seal first and determine what the seal power is. Then, I'll decide what to do next. You have to understand that the woman who calls herself the creator is not my ally. Instead, she might be my enemy. Oh, you mean, these gods might not be your enemy. Instead, they might be potential allies? The supreme god artifact's voice was filled with surprise. That's right. Do you still remember my usual style? Before you figure out the truth, it's best that you don't choose a side too easily. Otherwise, you'll become an idiot used by others. Yes, I don't want to be used by anyone unless they can pay the price. Unfortunately, this creator seems to only treat me as a free laborer. She wants to send me away with a few words. Chapter 846. Late at night, in the kitchen of a restaurant called Catherine's Kiss in Brooklyn, New York, a young Chinese man in his early 20s was wearing a white apron, scrubbing a mountain of plates. His expression was serious and focused, as if washing the plates was a noble and great job. Even if the white-skinned, sexy Caucasian female boss stood not far away and looked at him, he didn't respond. Instead, he worked even more cautiously. It had to be said that this scene was a bit strange, so strange that the other male workers in the kitchen showed expressions of envy and jealousy. Especially the black man who was also washing the plates. He immediately whispered, "Hey, buddy, you're in luck. You know, I've worked in this restaurant for half a year, but I've never seen our charming boss pay so much attention to a man. Maybe you could be a little more proactive and ask her out for a meal after work or something." "Shut up. Get to work," the young Chinese man responded coldly. He lowered his head and quickly scrubbed the next plate. But if one looked closely, they would notice that a deep fear flashed in his eyes, as if the beautiful woman in front of him was a terrible monster. All right. Keep your solemn and cold demeanor. Perhaps that's what Catherine likes." The black man muttered softly and shrugged nonchalantly. After a month of working together, he had long been used to the other party's attitude of ignoring everyone. After a few minutes, the beautiful female boss finally turned and left the kitchen, disappearing at the end of the stairs around the corner. Seeing this scene, the young Chinese man was instantly relieved. The tense expression on his face also relaxed. Maybe the other workers in the kitchen didn't know the identity of this Catherine, but he had seen his boss use her strong to throw a werewolf full of thick hair into the air and fall to his death. He definitely wouldn't have any improper thoughts about her. In fact, he wasn't from this world, but came from another world with a similarity of more than 90%, also known as Earth. The reason why he was thrown here was because he got drunk in a bar and complained to a stranger that he didn't know. He complained that the real world was too monotonous, that work was too boring, and that the relationship between people was too cold. It would be great if he could live in a fantasy world. As for the stranger's appearance, he couldn't remember it at all because he was drunk. But who would have thought that such a normal complaint would cause such a terrible tragedy? When he woke up, he was surprised to find that he was naked in a dirty alley. There was a palm-sized parchment scroll beside him. On it was written, "My dear friend, this is the fantasy world you wanted. Please enjoy it." At first, he thought that it was just a bad joke and prank by his friend. So he picked up the scroll and walked out of the alley, intending to see who was messing with him. However, as the saying goes, if you don't look, you won't know, but when you do, you'll be shocked. Whether it was the passers-by or the shops doing business, they were basically all white, black, and Latino people. The number of Asians was pitifully small. If it was a prank, it was a bit too much. Following that, he obtained a set of old clothes from a kind-hearted old man and headed towards the city center under his guidance. A few hours later, he saw the famous Statue of Liberty, the Empire State Building, the Golden Gate Bridge, and other iconic buildings. At that moment, no matter how stupid he was, he knew that this was the largest and most prosperous city in America, New York. Even time had been turned back to 2003. Shock, confusion, disbelief. With complicated feelings that could not be described in words, he began to try to contact his family and friends on the other side of the ocean, trying to figure out what had happened. But unfortunately, there seemed to be no trace of his existence in this world. After countless repeated confirmations, he finally realized that the words written on the parchment scroll were not a joke. They were real. The only thing he was not clear about was what the so-called fantasy meant. Until more than 20 days ago, he met his current boss, Catherine Agnes, a witch who wielded terrifying supernatural powers. Zhang Cheng. Here, this is your salary for this week. Be careful when you go back later. The streets have been a bit chaotic recently. An old man of Mexican descent who looked to be in his 50s suddenly walked in and threw an envelope of cash on the table. His name was Kars. On the surface, he was the manager of this restaurant, but behind the scenes, he was Catherine Agnes' servant, assistant, and housekeeper. He also had some incredible powers. Thank you very much, sir. The Chinese youth hurriedly turned around and thanked him. He did not even look at how much money was in the envelope before stuffing it into his pocket. As a person without a birth certificate, driver's license, green card, or work visa, he couldn't enjoy any insurance or social benefits at all. He could only sneak around and do illegal work, living carefully on the meager cash he earned every week. Occasionally, he also had to avoid the police and immigration department surprise inspections, as well as the harassment of hooligans. But today was the 30th day since he came to this world. It was a very special day. As long as he passed midnight, the first mission given by the mysterious parchment scroll, which was to successfully live for 30 days, would be completed. At that time, he would randomly select a profession from the many fantasy games he had played, as well as movies he had watched. He would then enter the world of the profession and obtain his own power. Ever since he was chased by a werewolf with a mouth full of sharp teeth for 3 streets and was almost torn to pieces by the werewolf, he realized that despite the ordinary appearance of this earth, there were many supernatural creatures and people with special abilities that only existed in myths and folklore, including vampires, werewolves, shapeshifters, ghouls, ghosts, devils, angels, wizards, demon hunters, witch doctors, shaman priests, and so on. Among the many ordinary people, there were many supernatural creatures and people with special abilities that existed only in myths and folklore. If he did not want to die for no reason one day, he must have the ability to at least protect himself. As for who exactly threw him into this world, and what their purpose was, he did not intend to think about it for the time being. After all, if the other party could throw a person from one time to another, or even a parallel universe, their power must be unimaginably strong. It could even be a prank by some god in the multiverse. What's more, even if he found the mastermind, he could not force the other party to send him back. So, he had to honestly improve his power and gain a foothold in this world first. Filled with an urgent desire for the mysterious power, Zhang Cheng quickly washed the mountainous pile of dishes in the sink. He took off his work clothes and changed into a cheap casual outfit he got from a second-hand shop. He then strode toward his residence. New York's Brooklyn was not a safe place. Especially for the sake of cheap rent, he chose a relatively chaotic neighborhood. Almost every night, he could hear gunshots and ear-piercing screams. Coupled with the existence of some mysterious power, a few people dying was a common occurrence. Perhaps it was because of this that the scroll gave the mission of successfully surviving for 30 days. Chapter 847. As the snowflakes piled up higher and higher, the originally warm and humid environment instantly transformed into a world of ice and snow. Even the trees in the forest were quickly covered in a thick layer of ice. Feeling the cold wind in the air that was close to minus 20 degrees Celsius, Zhang Cheng finally stopped this large-scale spell. He narrowed his eyes and observed the giant snake's reaction. After a full minute, he asked in an uncertain tone, "Do you think that snake has entered hibernation?" No. The powerful life force in its body shows no signs of weakening. The supreme heavenly god gave a straightforward answer. Are you sure? It has almost completely entered hibernation. Zhang Cheng frowned subconsciously as he stared intently at the giant snake in the distance. Yes, I'm very sure. Also, entering hibernation doesn't mean that it has lost its ability to move. Perhaps it's just a residual habit, just like how you humans instinctively curl up when you feel cold to reduce the loss of heat. The supreme heavenly god explained calmly. All right, then let's give it a try. As a typical action-oriented person, Zhang Cheng directly pressed his hand against a large rock at the edge of the valley and continuously injected a large amount of magic energy into it. In the blink of an eye, a magic puppet that was over 40 meters tall and completely composed of magma emerged from the ground. It was so huge that it exuded an astonishing amount of heat. After a short while, the ice and snow on the ground began to melt. At the same time, large amounts of water vapor permeated the surroundings, forming a vast expanse of white fog. As if sensing a threat, the giant snake abruptly raised its head. Its 2 large yellow eyes widened as it coiled its body into an attacking posture. Damn it! As expected, this guy isn't hibernating. I don't understand. As a cold-blooded animal, how on earth is it able to maintain its ability to move in such a cold environment? Although the fog obscured part of his vision, Zhang Cheng could still clearly observe everything. It had to be said that for a giant snake that hadn't displayed any magic abilities up until now, it was a little too inconceivable for it to be able to resist the cold of -20 degrees Celsius. After all, the biggest difference between cold-blooded animals and warm-blooded animals was that warm-blooded animals had a self-thermoregulation system, which allowed their bodies to maintain a constant temperature under most circumstances. Therefore, they could maintain mobility regardless of whether they were cold or hot. However, for the former, the body's temperature would change according to the changes in the environment. Especially when the temperature became cold, the body's metabolic ability would rapidly decline and even enter a dormant state. It would only recover its ability to move when the temperature rose. This was also why many cold-blooded animals had the habit of basking in the sun. They could only move normally when their body temperature was high enough. However, the problem was that the giant snake in front of him clearly violated biological common sense. Even though its body temperature was almost the same as the environment, it was not affected at all. As the lava puppet closed in, the giant snake finally couldn't hold back any longer. It charged out, attempting to use its thick body to wrap around the giant and crush it bit by bit. But before it could wrap itself around twice, it was immediately scalded by the terrifyingly high temperature of the lava. It began to roll up and down crazily. At the same time, thousands of strange, mysterious symbols appeared on the surface of the black scales. In the next second, boom, the core of the lava puppet, which was composed of magic energy, suddenly exploded without any warning. Immediately afterward, its massive body collapsed and completely transformed into a pool of flowing lava. Then, it slowly cooled down as the temperature dropped. This is... Zhang Cheng's eyes shone with undisguised astonishment. It's energy oscillation. My master, the scales on the surface of this snake possess the energy oscillation ability that all spell breakers yearn for even in their dreams. Any spell that doesn't take effect immediately will be destroyed by this snake, the paramount heavenly god quickly replied. In terms of sensing magic energy, it was undoubtedly the most sensitive. Thus, it was able to determine the true reason behind the lava puppet's self-destruction. I see. Zhang Qing nodded thoughtfully. I now understand why the gods of the Two Rivers Valley would treat this snake as the guardian of this seal. Its powerful life force, its miraculous scales that are almost immune to magic, and it also possesses the characteristic of super regeneration. Regardless of whether it's using magic energy or physical attacks, it's extremely difficult to kill it. That's right. Look, the burns on its body are already gradually recovering. I suggest that we either don't attack it or give it a good beating. Oof. It's just a mere snake. Although its ability is a little special, it's nothing in the face of the power of death. Today, let me fuse with death and do a little test. Just as he finished speaking, Zhang Cheng's eyes abruptly turned into the purest black. From afar, they looked like two pieces of obsidian. They were emotionless and emotionless, like two cold machines. The giant snake seemed to have sensed danger. It suddenly opened its bloody mouth and rushed toward where he was standing. He could even see the terrifying hook-like fangs in its mouth. However, Zhang Cheng continued to stand on the spot as if he didn't see anything. Only when the stench of blood rushed toward him did he speak in an extremely cold and hollow voice. Death. This is a form of absolute equality. Instantly, the giant snake stopped all of its movements, and its entire body began to tremble violently. Its two pale yellow vertical pupils suddenly shrank, as if it was afraid of something. In this world, nothing is eternal. Even the gods are no exception. In the end, they will all return to eternal death. Now, I summon you in the name of death. Come, pitiful little thing, become one of the eternal dead. After saying this, Zhang Cheng reached out with his right hand and gently touched the giant snake's jaw. Bam! In the next second, this indescribably huge beast collapsed to the ground. Its entire body began to decay rapidly. In the end, only a huge skeleton and a strange energy exuding from the snake's skin were left. Most importantly, in the center of the giant snake's body, A jade-green plant gradually grew. It was so exquisite and beautiful that one would be involuntarily attracted to it just by looking at it. The grass of eternal life. So this is the legendary grass of eternal life. There was a hint of excitement in the paramount heavenly god's voice. Unfortunately, Zhang Cheng was currently fused with the power of death. Thus, he didn't have any rationality or emotions to speak of. Thus, he didn't respond. He used a full 20 minutes to struggle free from the urge to destroy everything. He sighed with a wry smile, as expected of the most fundamental power in the entire universe. Even with my current strength, I can't help but be affected by it. Chapter 848. Did you record my state after I fused with the rule of death? Zhang Cheng didn't pay any attention to the snake's carcass, nor was he in a hurry to destroy the seal. Instead, he was more concerned about what had happened in the past few seconds. This was because after fusing with the rule of death, he had instantly lost himself, and he couldn't even remember what he had done. As a person with an extremely strong mind, losing control like this was clearly not normal. The paramount heavenly god hesitated for a moment before replying in a slightly concerned voice, "My apologies, master. I really don't know how to describe your state just then. From a certain perspective, you were like a soulless husk. Even though it was only for an instant, death had already taken over your body, mind, and soul." You're saying I was affected by death? Zhang Cheng's expression darkened. No, not affected. It was replaced. When you fused with death, death replaced you. That's why you were able to draw upon the immense power of death to effortlessly slay an ancient snake that had lived for over 6,000 years after consuming the grass of eternal life. The paramount heavenly god quickly corrected. I understand now. No wonder Faust's mental state had always been a little off. It turns out that the true price of using the power of death isn't to obtain death's favor through sacrifice. Instead, it's that during the process of using the power of death, one will inevitably be affected by death and gradually lose oneself. Rather than saying that obtaining death's favor is a price, it's more accurate to say that it's a way to increase one's power. The more you in the favor of death, the more powerful the nomological power you can mobilize. Zhang Cheng's eyes flickered with a strange light as he stroked his chin and muttered to himself. So, you think death is a power with self-awareness? It will constantly affect all mortals who try to control themselves? The paramount heavenly god made a brief summary. Zhang Cheng nodded before quickly shaking his head. I don't know. I only know that when I use this power, I have no self-awareness. It's like a computer that's being remotely controlled. The other party will take away the life of the target based on the decisions I make when I'm conscious. I understand now. Everything that happened just now was death controlling you, not the other way around. That's right. That's a very accurate description. Without a doubt, death is the strangest power I've ever come into contact with, and the most difficult to tame and control. It could be used as a trump card to turn the situation around at a critical moment, but it could never be used regularly. At least until I figure out what's going on with these anomalies, it's best to use them as little as possible. Zhang Cheng had always been very vigilant against powers that were not under his control. He would never allow anyone or any force to override his subjective consciousness, no matter how powerful that force was. The paramount heavenly gods also agreed with this, and they immediately chimed in. Indeed, we have to be careful. I have a feeling that this Faust fellow is up to no good behind my back. He must have some ulterior motive for giving you that book. You don't have to remind me. I know. Zhang Cheng smiled indifferently. For Faust to send that book over, it was obvious that he was up to no good. However, the problem was that he still didn't know what the other party wanted to do. Was he trying to drag him down with him and make him a fervent believer of death? Or did he just want a relatively stable ally with the same goal and power? In this world of mutual deception, all alliances were ultimately signed for the sake of breaking and betraying one another. Thus, an ally now could be an enemy in the future. Zhang Cheng had experienced this firsthand. Fortunately, the alliance between the three of them was still very stable. At the very least, he didn't have to worry about betrayal before conflict of interest arose. Thus, he didn't dwell on this for too long. Instead, he walked directly to the center of the valley where the giant snake's skeleton was entrenched. He bent down and carefully observed the breathtakingly beautiful plant. Soon, he said in a half-joking tone, "Is this the legendary herb of eternity?" Even the half-human, half-god hero, Gilgamesh, was unable to obtain eternal life, but this mere plant can do it. Strictly speaking, it's not a real plant. Instead, it's a manifestation of life force. You can understand it as a representation of the power of life that opposes death. This power can't be easily destroyed by death. Thus, after you killed the snake, it was once again manifested, the paramount heavenly god explained calmly. Manifestation of life force? That sounds interesting. But the question is, what's the use of this thing? Zhang Cheng gently plucked the herb of eternity from the ground. He felt the indescribable surging life force. As a special individual who had fused with countless excellent genes, including divinity, he was no longer limited by the lifespan of a mortal. In addition, he could concoct life-prolonging potions himself. Unless he was killed by an even more powerful force, he would never have to worry about dying. As for the herb of eternity, it seemed that there was nothing special about it other than the ability to never age. As for the mysterious symbols on the giant snake scales, they were definitely the result of someone or a god carving them on purpose. They weren't naturally evolved biological abilities. Just as Zhang Cheng wasn't sure what to do with the herb of eternity, the paramount heavenly god suddenly interjected, "Great master, I think it's best for you to eat it. No matter what, a powerful life force is a type of energy. It will encourage the fused genes in your body to mutate and evolve in a positive direction." "All right, then I'll eat it." Without another word, Zhang Cheng directly stuffed the plant into his mouth. After chewing briefly, he swallowed it. Instantly, a surge of power began to flow through his blood to every cell in his body. For a moment, he even lost control of his body's appearance. One moment, he would transform into a giant dragon. The next moment, he would transform into a mind flayer. The next moment, he would transform into a mountain golem. The next moment, he would transform into a human. In the process of rapid transformation, these genes that were originally somewhat isolated slowly and completely fused together. Finally, they formed a new species, a monster that encompassed the characteristics of countless life forms in countless worlds. Chapter 849. In the crack of the distorted void, the woman who claimed to be the creator was just as usual, silently watching the interesting worlds in the multiverse and even one or two interesting mortals to kill time. However, just as she was trying to spy on the intimate interaction between the native man and woman, she suddenly felt a huge force breaking through the seal, passing through layers of obstacles and gushing in her body. Familiar, powerful, omnipotent. It was as if she had returned to being the supreme creator who could control the entire planet and create and destroy everything according to her will. Unfortunately, this feeling didn't last for too long. It disappeared after about 2 to 3 minutes and was replaced by a strong sense of emptiness. Because she had once possessed that kind of extremely powerful strength, she was more and more eager to break all the seals and reclaim everything that belonged to her. Suppressing the indescribable hatred and anger in her heart, the woman who claimed to be the creator finally calmed down and put on a gentle, mysterious, beautiful, and elegant smile again. She stretched out a slender, white finger and gently tapped the void. In an instant, a huge piece of land was created out of thin air, followed by a blurry shadow that gradually condensed into a solid body. It was Zhang Cheng who had temporarily retained his dragon form. His body that had just fused was obviously not very stable yet. Some parts would still change from time to time. My child, you really didn't disappoint me. You actually broke the second seal so quickly. Well done." The woman descended from the sky and held up the dragon's huge head. Her eyes were as dazzling as the stars in the sky, as if they were going to suck people in. Thank goodness. Zhang Cheng's willpower was still quite strong. He was bewitched for less than a second before he regained his senses. He replied in a calm tone, You don't have to thank me. This is my mission to begin with, isn't it? Mission? No, don't keep such a distance from me. In fact, you can treat me as your blood-related relative. In fact, there's no one in this world who understands you better than I do and is more willing to accept you. The woman gently stroked the dragon's black scales and said with deep affection, "Sorry, I'm not used to being too close to others, even if they are my blood-related relatives. The so-called kinship, strictly speaking, should be a kind of instinct derived from ensuring the continuation of the entire race, carrying out reproductive activities, and protecting the young. But for high-level life forms like you and me, who have almost no lifespan limit, there is no need to reproduce, nor do we need these cowardly emotions." Zhangqing obviously didn't buy it. He still maintained the absolutely rational state of mind that was as cold as a machine. In order to ensure that the secrets in his brain would not be exposed, he temporarily sealed a part of his memory, and then used a method of personality simulation to turn himself into a complete monster for a short period of time. Because this was the only way to avoid the opponent's powerful perception. The woman obviously didn't care about this. Like an elegant cat, she tiptoed around the dragon's body twice before shaking her head with a smile. Coward? How dare you treat human emotions as cowardice? No, feelings were never a sign of weakness. On the contrary, it was a kind of power that could be as calm as a windless lake or as intense as a volcanic eruption. You shouldn't abandon your emotions, and you shouldn't abandon your pride as a human. I admit that humans are a race with unlimited potential and even occupy an extremely important position in countless worlds. But the problem is that humans are too weak, and at the same time, they have desires and limitations that can never be satisfied. I need to jump out of this limit and stand at a higher position to look down on the world and the universe. All the pride and identity of humans are not important to me at all. What's important is that I know who I am and what I'm pursuing. As he said this, Zhangqing narrowed his eyes and felt the terrifying energy contained in the petite body of the creator standing in front of him. Unlike him, whether it was in terms of energy level or pure utilization, the other party was far superior to him by who knew how many times. There is no need to ask to know that this was an absolute suppression in terms of the essence and level of life. Just like what he said before, the reason why gods were stronger than other life forms was that their energy intake and control were far superior to other life forms. If the largest hydrogen bomb tested by humans with a yield of 50 million tons was regarded as 1 unit of energy, then most gods would be equivalent to 100 to 500,000 units of energy. Of course, in terms of pure destructive power, gods might not necessarily be comparable to the Tsar Emperor hydrogen bomb, but in terms of the essence of energy, they were definitely much stronger. As for Zhang Cheng himself, if he went all out, he could probably mobilize more than 2,000 units of energy in an instant. But the woman standing in front of him, whose power was still in a sealed state, had an energy level of more than 1 million or even 10 million units of energy. He could not believe that such a terrifying life form could be like him, an ordinary person in the beginning. But this ordinary person did not necessarily come from the ordinary earth without any supernatural powers. Through the conversation with Warrant, Zhang Cheng discovered that all the transmigrators summoned by the parchment scroll actually came from different parallel universes. Take Warrant, for example. The Earth he came from was a wasteland 200 years after the end of the nuclear war. Therefore, compared to mysterious magic, he preferred to use the help of knowledge and technology to defeat his enemies. Therefore, he created countless troublesome props. Coupled with the ability of foresight, he could torture his opponents to the point of insanity. All right, I think I understand what you mean. Compared to maintaining relationships, you seem to prefer simple and direct rewards. Since that's the case, I'll give you a reward. Having said that, the woman raised her hand and made a grabbing motion in the endless void. In just a few seconds, a large amount of unknown black matter began to condense and finally formed a cylinder with a diameter of about 10 centimeters and a height of more than 2 meters. Zhang Cheng's pupils suddenly contracted. He could feel that the energy contained in this small cylinder had already exceeded 100,000 energy units. Don't ask. You only need to know that this is the reward I'm paying you. Take it and study it slowly. Trust me, once you figure out the true nature of this thing, you'll be ecstatic. Also, I'm looking forward to you breaking the 3rd, 4th, and 5th seals. Remember, as long as you don't disappoint me, I won't disappoint you. Chapter 850. F*CK. My head hurts so much. Accompanied by painful screams, Zhang Cheng's huge dragon body crawled on the ground and let out a deafening roar. Because he was currently receiving the memories and emotions that had been taken out and sealed previously, his whole body was in so much pain that he kept rolling on the ground. Whether it was the trees or the stones around him, they were all crushed under the terrifying size of the dragon. There was no other way. In order to ensure that nothing went wrong, he did not use the mind retrieval method like the one invented by the wizards in the Harry Potter world. Instead, he directly pried open his own brain, directly cut out the relevant memory area, and stored it in a glass culture tank that he had prepared. He even included a part of his own soul in it. Although this method was cruel, it could isolate the possibility of his own secrets from both physical and perceptual senses. Of course, the price was the terrible pain that came after the fusion. For ordinary people, such a method of forcibly and violently cutting out the brain and soul was simply courting death. Not to mention other things. Just the huge chaos caused by the disappearance and fusion of memories was enough to drive them crazy. But now, Zhangqing only vented his anger for about half an hour before quickly returning to normal. His 2 eyes flashed with a strange light. After a long while, he opened his mouth and asked the divine weapon that was caught by the little claws on his wings. "How was it? Did you throw that thing down just now?" "Yes, master. We can now locate the void crack where the woman is. However, I have to remind you that the coordinates can only be used once at most. After that, it will be discovered." The Supreme God gave the answer without hesitation. "Very good. Don't worry, I'm not so stupid as to face an opponent that I can't defeat at my current level. That's just an insurance, a gamble and a risk that I have no choice but to take." Zhangqing slowly stood up and stretched his huge black body. Due to the fusion and absorption of various genes, including the genes of Galen, at this moment he still surpassed the most powerful Dragon King of Azeroth, Wings of Death. Be careful. There are too many uncertainties in your body, and they could push you to the pinnacle of power, but they could also push you down into the bottomless abyss along the way. The paramount heavenly God cautioned in a conscientious manner. "It's okay. Do you think I'm not mentally prepared?" Zhang Cheng asked with a sneer. "No, I've already made preparations. Just as someone once said, if a person did not have the resolve to die, it would be impossible to have the courage to stand up and start a revolution to overthrow the existing ruling class. Do you still remember the ball of light? My next step is to devour it. Continue to evolve towards a higher level of life form. Devour that cluster of light. Are you sure your brain is still normal?" The paramount heavenly God's voice was filled with shock and disbelief. "Ha ha 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 ha." Zhang Cheng grinned and shook his head. "No, I'm not the one who's crazy. It's the world. Come, let us embrace this madness and transform into sharp swords. Either we break all the shackles and stand at the top to look down on all living beings, or we smash our heads against the iron walls until they bleed. From the day I met the Creator, everything was destined. Between me and her, only one can survive. You are truly loyal to your ambitions and desires. Since that's the case, let's make a bet. If the final result is a success, then you can return to Azeroth and devour the unawakened Titan." Without a doubt, the paramount heavenly God was also influenced by this indomitable spirit, and he revealed the next step of his plan. Although he still hadn't figured out what that cluster of light was, his instincts told him that it was essentially similar to a star core. In other words, it was a universal life form that was in the process of being nurtured. Once the fusion was complete, Zhang Cheng would undoubtedly complete a life form transformation and join the ranks of the most powerful life forms in the universe. In this way, he would have the prerequisite to devouring the unawakened Titan of Azeroth. One had to realize that a star core wasn't something that just anyone could devour. The enormous amount of energy contained within it was enough to explode over 99% of people. Zhang Cheng even suspected that when Archimon the Defiler wanted to use the World Tree to absorb the energy of the entire planet, even if he didn't die from the explosion, he would have been stuffed to death by the boundless energy. Perhaps the demonized Arita possessed extremely powerful innate talents, especially Archimon, who was the most powerful of the three Titans. However, the problem was that he wasn't a member of the Eternal Titans. From a life form perspective, his fragile body couldn't withstand the surging energy of the Titans at all. Looking through the history of the universe where the world of Azeroth was located, it wasn't difficult to find that almost all the Titans' bodies were cast from extremely special metals, and they weren't fragile flesh and blood. Perhaps what kind of unspeakable secret was hidden in the Titans' bodies? With a lot of guesses and questions, Zhang Cheng quickly left the second seal and directly teleported back to New York. As soon as he returned to Earth, his mobile phone rang. Without any hesitation, he took it out and pressed the answer button. Instantly, Leonid's slightly excited voice came through the phone. "Have you seen the recent news?" "News? What news?" Zhang Cheng frowned subconsciously and glanced at the electronic clock and calendar hanging on the table at home. He found that it had been 10 days since he entered the seal. Of course, it's news that made the Americans look bad. As you requested, I've already posted the video of the negotiation on the internet. Right now, the whole world is in a state of panic and chaos. In less than 2 days, the UA military bases around the world have been attacked by terrorists one after another. Now everyone knows that they lost more than 10,000 troops in Iraq, as well as hundreds of billions of dollars worth of electronic equipment, Leonid explained gloatingly. "Oh, it didn't trouble you." Zhang Cheng raised his eyebrows slightly in surprise and quickly turned on the TV to watch the 24-hour news. As expected, almost all the English-language media were broadcasting this hour-long video of the White House office. Because of the assistance of artificial intelligence programs, the UA government couldn't easily manipulate the media and public opinion to cover up the facts like before. They could only desperately try to do public relations. "Hey, trouble us?" No, they can't care about that now. As far as I know, the UA is in a mess. There are a few old hardliners who clamored to never compromise with the terrorists, but they died in all kinds of accidents in less than 12 hours. Let me guess, this must be the doing of the behind-the-scenes financial groups. Yes, just as you predicted, they are afraid and expose their weakest side to the world. Based on my experience, the UA hegemony will soon be lost. Chapter 851. Haha, that's to be expected. Remember, we are now in a very critical period of change. Anything can happen. The decline of UA's hegemony means a lot of things. As long as we operate properly, the whole world will be under our control. Zhang Cheng enjoyed the ugliness of the White House spokesperson as he pursed his lips and gave a meaningful hint. Chaos. It was a vacuum state formed by the withdrawal of the power of order. It was also a paradise for schemers and ambitious people. As long as there were no one or two countries that could form absolute hegemony in military, culture, finance, and technology, then the world of ordinary people on Earth would be trapped in endless struggles. Next, in some more sensitive places, conflicts would intensify, and even proxy wars between superpowers would erupt. Leonid understood this very well. He nodded seriously and said, "I understand, but in the whole world, there is no country qualified to challenge the UA. Do we need to provide some funding to those countries that are willing to challenge the UA's hegemony?" "Funding? You mean?" Zhang Cheng asked with great interest. "It's very simple. We can send some necessary funds or technology support to the Far East. Only in this way, the political game between the world's superpowers will contain each other and ensure that our follow-up plan can be implemented smoothly." Leonid cautiously suggested. As an elite left over from the Red Empire that had been disintegrated for many years, he was very clear that with the arrival of the new century, ideological disputes gradually faded and were replaced by disputes over nationalism and religious culture. In this regard, the only countries that could compete with Europe and the UA were the two superpowers in the Far East. Although one of them had been disintegrated, it still had enough capital. Coupled with the ambitious new president who tried to restore the Soviet Union's status as a superpower in the world, it was fully capable of containing the power of NATO. The other one, on the other hand, was rapidly rising economically, releasing amazing industrial capacity, and providing a little bit of advanced technology. It could catch up and substantially weaken the influence of the UA in East Asia and even the Western Pacific. Tell me about your plan. Zhang Cheng's face showed an expression of interest. Although he had controlled the power behind the UA to some extent, the problem was that this control was not direct but through some so-called allies. As everyone knew, allies would one day become enemies for various reasons. Therefore, many times, it was a very good choice to cultivate a group of potential enemies for one's friends. I hope that we can provide some financial and sales support to the North. To put it simply, I want to buy weapons from them and resell them to war-prone areas. I believe that this money can help their economy recover quickly. As for the South, provide some technical information in the database, especially information on airplanes and warships. Sounds like a good idea. Let's do it according to your idea. But be careful not to reveal too much advanced technology. You know what I mean, don't you? Zhang Cheng hesitated for a moment before agreeing to the other party's plan. No matter what, this Earth was dominated by magic. Unless science and technology developed to the era of space colonization, it was impossible to pose a threat to the unimaginably powerful magic. Therefore, releasing a little bit of the black technology brought back from the Marvel Universe would not only not affect him, but he could also gain some benefits. Thank you for your trust. Don't worry, I will act appropriately. Oh, right. There's another piece of news I need to inform you. Abu Musab Zarqawi was killed by the UA Delta Special Forces 3 days ago. He died in his own nest, Leonid added before hanging up. Zhang Cheng was obviously not surprised by this. He sneered and said sarcastically, "Interesting. It's really interesting. Is this the holy war that they are advocating? Tell me, who betrayed him?" "A guy named Abu Omar, one of Zarqawi's most important assistants. Right now, he has inherited Zarqawi's legacy and intends to take advantage of the fact that the UA military strength in Iraq is damaged and a large number of electronic devices are unusable to actively expand their strength." Leonid gave the answer with a faint smile. There is no doubt that in the eyes of this Slavic old man, these extremist religious terrorists were like a group of barbarians and clowns. They did not understand how much war had changed in just a decade or two. The so-called guerrilla warfare was no longer as effective as before. As long as a few military powers were willing to tear off their hypocritical masks, the entire Middle East could be flattened in minutes. When Zhang Cheng heard this news, he nodded with satisfaction. "Very good. Continue to sell them more weapons. Let that land completely turn into purgatory. When necessary, you can push them from behind and continue to expand the scale of the war. I want to see a protracted and tragic war that will never end. As you wish." Just as the entire UA political scene was brewing a storm, in a manor house on the outskirts of New York, an unprecedented gathering was in progress. In addition to a few generals from the Pentagon, the rest were all senior executives of the UA military complex and shareholders of major companies. They were gathered for no other reason than to celebrate a sky-high military purchase contract. That's right. This military purchase of hundreds of billions of dollars was to replace the electronic parts destroyed or damaged in the thermonuclear warhead explosion. Although for the entire UA, it was an unimaginably huge loss, so much so that the bureaucrats in the White House were ready to resign and be impeached by the Congress. But for the companies in the UA military industry, this was simply a windfall. Some guys even privately praised Zarqawi, who launched the terrorist attack, and hoped that this kind of thing would happen a few more times. Anyway, as long as they could get more orders from the Department of Defense, these capitalists didn't care how much debt and fiscal deficit the UA had. It might sound strange, but in fact, in addition to the losses suffered by the UA government, the military would get more and more advanced equipment. The generals could reap the benefits of this purchase. The military enterprises would also gain profits. The workers would also get enough salary, and the stock prices of the military enterprises in the financial market would soar, bringing benefits to investors. It was simply killing many birds with one stone. Of course, among these greedy humans, there was also a different species. To be exact, it was a terrifying black dragon. She was none other than Princess Onyxia, who inherited the legacy of her dead husband. This beautiful woman, who was dressed in a sexy black evening dress and exuded a mature and seductive temperament, was surrounded by at least 7 or 8 suitors at the moment. Among them, there was no lack of military and political officials from the current government and business tycoons. Even a few young men in their early 20s were deeply attracted, eager to become her subordinates. They had no idea what kind of dangerous and terrifying creature they were dealing with. Chapter 852. Ms. Katrana, your investment vision is really admirable. In just half a year, you've tripled your total assets. You're the perfect example of both beauty and wisdom. A middle-aged man in his 40s, who had combed his hair meticulously, flattered with a smile. Like all the shrewd bootlickers in the world, he understood that most women were emotional. Compared to the real professional evaluation, they prefer to listen to some flowery words, regardless of whether they were smart or stupid. One had to know that bootlickers were actually divided into different levels. The lowest level was like those idiots who had no bottom line at all. They were like slaves or servants who were ordered around by women. In the end, they would either end up with nothing or become the savior who took over. However, a truly advanced bootlicker was like this rather handsome middle-aged man. He knew what to say at the right time and what to do in order to gain the most favorable impression. He could even stir up a woman's heart that was unwilling to be left out. You flatter me, Mr. Carter. I'm just lucky. The Princess of the Black Dragon maintained a polite smile and responded. Just like when she was in Storm City, she still used the name Katrana Prester and successfully entered the upper echelons of the country. Although she had not yet reached the level where she could control the political situation, she already had one foot in the circle. As long as she was willing, she could give a hint to the higher-ups of the Department of Defense, and they would immediately kneel down and lick her toes without the use of magic power. Heaven, a real heaven. In Onyxia's eyes, the UA was simply the place of her dreams. She could freely perform what she couldn't complete in Storm City. No, no, no. You are too modest, Mayam. Your talent in financial investment has been recognized by the entire Wall Street. If you need it, I think almost all investment banks and securities companies would be willing to hire you as the company's management with a high salary. Another slightly younger guy hurriedly stepped forward and took the initiative of the conversation from his competitor. As the saying goes, the goddess belongs to everyone. Why should you be the only one a licker? For a while, these men who were affected by the lower body and entered the estrus period began to show their demeanor, conversation, knowledge, identity, and influence in their own industry like peacocks spreading their tails. Onyxia, on the other hand, had effortlessly obtained the information she needed. Soon, she used the excuse of going to the bathroom to leave. The corners of her mouth curled up slightly, revealing a mocking smile. Just as she was standing in front of the female washroom mirror, admiring her beautiful appearance and impressive figure, a figure suddenly appeared in the mirror. However, the Black Dragon Princess didn't show any signs of panic. Instead, she first switched to the dragon's eyes and scanned the single room. After confirming that there were no outsiders, she teased in a rather lazy voice. How did you come in? If I remember correctly, didn't you go to Africa to do some ridiculous humanitarian aid some time ago? First of all, how I got in has nothing to do with you. Secondly, I'm doing humanitarian aid so that I can better experience this world and experience life. With that, the intruder took off her hood, revealing a breathtakingly beautiful face. She was none other than the demon hunter Silner. Tell me, why are you looking for me? Onyxia asked without turning her head as she fixed her makeup. Something happened to your offspring. The elf replied while stroking her platinum long hair. My offspring? The Black Dragon Princess frowned subconsciously. She suddenly had a bad feeling. Yes, Do you remember the dragon eggs that Master sold? After one of them hatched, due to the influence of some unknown magic ritual, it grew at an amazing speed and became more and more violent, cruel, and cunning. About a week ago, this female baby dragon killed her owner and successfully escaped into the Everglades National Park in Florida. Silner quickly explained the purpose of her visit. However, Onyxia sneered and said, "What does this have to do with me? Do you want me to save her?" The demon hunter shook her head gently and said, "No. I mean, she seems to have retained part of the memory of Azeroth in her mind. She even clearly called out her mother's name, which is you." "What?" The Black Dragon Princess' expression changed instantly. As a dragon who longed to abandon the past and regain a new life, she was most afraid of her identity being exposed and returning to the days when she needed to hide. Very surprising, isn't it? To be honest, I'm also very surprised. She is different from her siblings. She knows where she came from and what her identity is. So I think this is an uncertain factor that needs to be eliminated as soon as possible. Silner gave a serious suggestion. As a stowaway from Azeroth, she even died once, so she didn't want the world of Azeroth to be known by outsiders. Damn it, I hate unexpected situations. When I find this little bastard, I will wring her neck with my own hands. Onyxia didn't care about her makeup at this moment. She stuffed everything in her bag and cursed in a low voice. Time is tight. We must find her offspring before the residents of the underworld find her, Silner said as she took out a small bottle of almost dry dragon blood from her arms. This is her blood when she was injured in a battle. I believe it should be very useful for you. Of course. With this, I can find her in a few hours. The Black Dragon Princess opened the stopper and sniffed the blood gently. Soon, she cast a teleportation spell and disappeared. The next second, together with the demon hunter, she appeared in the depths of the endless great swamp out of thin air and broke the neck of a crocodile that rushed up to try to take advantage of the situation. A ferocious smile quickly appeared on Onyxia's face as she sensed the residual energy waves and smell in the air. She muttered to herself, "Ah, this cunning little bastard is hiding nearby. I can smell the residual smell of her hunting. I also saw the traces of magic. She's growing up faster than I thought, and the tracker is not far behind us." Silner fiercely pulled out the double blades hidden behind her and got into a battle stance, because she knew that what she had to do next was not to track the whereabouts of the baby dragon, but to stay and delay the residents of the underworld to ensure that they would never know the truth. Don't worry. I will take care of everything in 10 minutes. The Black Dragon Princess didn't say anything and directly turned into a black dragon. She flew across the water full of crocodiles and pythons and went straight to the trail left by the baby dragon. Chapter 853. Feeling the strong wind blowing past her cheeks, Onyxia, who had not transformed into her dragon form for a long time, narrowed her eyes and looked around for the unique scent of a black dragon. As the source of her bloodline, she could sense that there was a descendant of hers hidden in this vast swamp. But the problem was that the other party obviously knew some hiding skills and did not leave behind much information. Just as the Black Dragon Princess began to feel a little annoyed, she suddenly found a piece of black scale falling off the grass. Without any hesitation, she swooped down directly, glanced at the soil on the surface of the scale, and curled her lips and said to herself, "Ah, damn little thing, I've finally found you." As soon as she finished speaking, Onyxia suddenly opened her mouth and spat out a deadly flame into the muddy swamp behind her. Boom! Blinding orange-red flames instantly enveloped everything within 100 meters. Not only did all the water evaporate, but even the soil and gravel rapidly solidified under the terrifyingly high temperature, and some even melted into boiling lava. But before the spitting ended, a figure about 10 meters long suddenly rushed out of the magma and rolled to extinguish the flames on its body. There is no doubt that this black figure was nothing else but a black dragon that was still in its infancy. Because it had not yet grown up, its scales were not like the adult black dragons of Azeroth, which were completely immune to fire damage. After extinguishing the flames on its body with the help of the moist environment of the swamp, The little guy struggled to get up from the mud and looked at the huge monster in front of it with eyes full of awe. After a full minute, it asked in Draconic, "You are my mother, the Black Dragon Princess Onyxia, the daughter of the Black Dragon King Miserio?" "Yes. You seem to be different from the other dragon eggs I laid. You have awakened a lot of memories of Azeroth, right?" Onyxia approached with graceful steps, sizing up this unique dragon whelp with great interest. It was important to know that the dragons of Azeroth were not the dragons of Faerun Continent. From birth, they would have a lot of knowledge about themselves and the world they were in. They clearly knew their position in the food chain. On the contrary, they were very weak and stupid when they were young. Like other intelligent life forms, they would become smarter and stronger as they grew older and more experienced. Therefore, a baby dragon that had just hatched from a dragon egg would not have any memories. Yes, those humans. They performed an interesting magic ritual on me, as if they wanted to increase my growth rate by infusing me with energy. But what they didn't expect was that this would activate the memory hidden in my bloodline, the memory of the entire Black Dragon clan. The young dragon replied, while licking its injured wing. She seemed to be in a terrible state. Not only were there more than a dozen wounds of various sizes on her body, but some of them were emitting a pungent stench. It was obvious that she had been cursed or poisoned by magic. "So you killed one of them and escaped?" The Black Dragon Princess exuded the aura of an adult dragon. She put her head, which was many times larger than the other party, close to him. Two dazzling and bright flames spurted out of her nostrils. The dragon whelp was undoubtedly scared out of its wits. It subconsciously shrank its neck and hurriedly nodded, "Yes, I'm a noble black dragon, not a pet raised by those humans." When Onyxia heard this, a satisfied expression appeared on her ferocious face. "Well said. It seems that your bloodline has given you the pride of being a black dragon. But unfortunately, you're too weak. So weak that you can't protect yourself at all. But at the same time, the awakened memory in your mind is a big problem for me. Are you going to kill me, mother?" The dragon whelp's pupils suddenly shrank. All the muscles on her body tightened, and she was ready to fight to the death. Although she was very clear that even if she went all out, it would be difficult to pose any threat to the Black Dragon Princess. But in order to fight for a glimmer of hope of survival, she was willing to do her best, even if she was killed in the end. "Kill you? I did have such a plan just now, but now it seems that you still have some value. Come, try to change into a human form. I'll bring you to see someone. If he allows you to live, then you have the right to live." With that said, Onyxia quickly changed from the dragon form to the human form and began to prepare the long-distance teleportation spell. Realizing that she had temporarily saved her life, the dragon whelp immediately changed quickly and finally turned into a little lowly of about 6 or 7 years old with black hair and black eyes. Her appearance was unusually lovable. When the spell was ready, the Black Dragon Princess grabbed her, and then the two disappeared together. At the same time, on the other side of the Great Swamp, Silner was waving her dual blades and fighting beautifully like art. She had trapped more than 10 people of the underground world in the same place. No matter how these guys tried, they couldn't pose even the slightest threat to her. On the other hand, the female elf demon hunter relied on her extremely nimble combat experience to easily restrain all of the pursuers. If it wasn't for the fact that she didn't want to kill, the unlucky guy who was surrounded and covered in wounds would have been torn apart and swallowed by the hungry crocodiles. F***CK. This woman is too evil. She's playing with us. A black man whose upper body was covered in red paint gritted his teeth and cursed in a low voice. Nonsense. She's stopping us from tracking the injured dragon. Even a fool can see that. Another person rolled his eyes in annoyance. No, we have to think of something. If this goes on, even if she doesn't kill us, those guys who come later won't let us go. After all, the bounty this time is so high that everyone in North America who has a little bit of strength will act upon hearing the news. **T. Do I need you to say that? But the problem is, do you think we can beat this woman? Maybe we can talk to her. Just when these unlucky guys were on guard while whispering to each other to discuss how to get out of the current predicament, Silner suddenly stopped what she was doing and picked up a phone call in front of more than a dozen enemies. After a brief conversation, she pressed the button to hang up and said to the nervous underground world residents with a smile, "Relax, my mission is over. I'm sorry for ruining your business, but please believe me, this is not a bad thing. At least you've saved your lives." "Who are you?" The team leader frowned and probed. "It doesn't matter who I am. For the safety of yourself, your friends, and your family, I sincerely suggest that you don't ask about it. You should know that too much curiosity will kill you. Goodbye. I hope we'll never meet again in the future." Silner put away her dual blades, turned around, and walked away while waving her hand without looking back. After a while, she disappeared into the depths of the overgrown swamp. Chapter 854. I'm sorry, my dear. I may be busy recently, so I can't accompany you to ride the motorcycle along the road around the United States. In order to express my apology, all the expenses on the road will be on my account. Have fun with Aisha. After ending the call with Elizabeth, Zhang Cheng sighed helplessly and stuffed the phone into his pocket. He raised his head and looked at the Black Dragon Princess and the baby dragon who appeared directly in the living room through teleportation magic a few minutes ago. He then held his chin and asked, "Tell me, what happened?" "It's the batch of dragon eggs you sold. One of them accidentally awakened the memory hidden in the bloodline." Onyxia succinctly told the truth and pushed the little lowly who was covered with more than a dozen wounds of various sizes forward. "A baby dragon?" Zhang Cheng raised his eyebrows slightly in surprise. "She's very special. I can feel a weak power of the earth from her. Generally speaking, it's impossible for a baby dragon who has just been born to obtain this kind of talent ability." Onyxia emphasized in a serious tone. It was also for this reason that she did not kill this uncertain factor. Unlike the other four color dragon aspects, the black dragons loved to use their own descendants as chess pieces and cannon fodder. In the extreme, they would even use dragon eggs and young dragons to conduct crazy biological experiments. So for them, killing a few of their offspring was as common as eating and drinking. However, for those baby dragons with special talents, black dragons were still very willing to give some preferential treatment. At least they would not casually kill them like crushing a bug. "It sounds interesting. Come here, little one." Zhang Cheng waved at the little lowly dragon. The latter was obviously a little scared and carefully moved 2 steps forward. Her eyes were full of fear and vigilance. If it were an ordinary person, he would probably immediately be overflowing with love and hold this little girl in his arms and dote on her. Unfortunately, Zhang Cheng was already a cold-blooded animal. He did not care about the feelings of the baby dragon at all. He directly invaded the brain and began to read the other party's memory. After about a few minutes, he found the part of the magic ritual and realized what was going on with these suddenly awakened memories. A playful expression appeared on his face. It's actually changing the flow of time in a specific area. The people of the Sorcerer Association are really not simple. It's been less than a year since they got the Time Stop Scroll, and they have already developed several stable magic rituals. You mean, those mortals tried to accelerate time to make the baby dragon grow faster. In the end, for some reason, some small accidents happened during the whole ritual. The Black Dragon Princess asked in an uncertain tone. "That's right. But in my opinion, this is not an accident, but something expected. Time has never been a power that can be easily controlled, and at the same time, it's the most prone to accidents. The slightest mistake in the operation could result in an irreversible effect. I think that your daughter should have some memories." Zhang Cheng, unhurriedly. To be honest, he had never taken the Sorcerer Association of this world seriously. In fact, he even despised them a little. But through the research progress of Time Stop magic, he suddenly realized that the Sorcerer Association's strength was actually not inferior to the Supreme Council at all, especially in terms of knowledge inheritance and the development of new spells. They were far more powerful than he had imagined. When Onyxia heard this, she nodded thoughtfully. "I see. So what do you plan to do with this little girl? Kill her? Or, there's no need to be so cruel. She's a black dragon after all. and I'm very curious about what changes will happen to her under the influence of the flow of time. How about this? You keep her by your side first and bring her over for me to do a thorough check after some time." Zhang Cheng hesitated for a moment and quickly made a decision. "Why not now? Because I have more important things to do now. If there's nothing else, it's best not to disturb me." After saying this, Zhang Cheng did not care about the Black Dragon Princess reaction. He directly opened a teleportation portal and came to the front of the Tower of Time alone. As the number of experiments increased, Adam began to use his own hands to combine a large number of scientific instruments and magic to create a set of special tools that were full of strange styles. At a glance, they were densely packed and covered an area of hundreds of square meters. Among them, the largest one even covered the ball of light from head to toe. It was densely packed with hundreds of thousands of probe needles of various sizes. Every change in spectral frequency of the ball of light would be recorded without missing a trace. Then, through analysis and interpretation, they would find out what this mysterious life form was trying to express. Zhang Cheng did not disturb the busy Adam. Instead, he picked up the experiment notes piled up on the table and started reading seriously. Unknowingly, a few hours passed just like that. When Adam was done, he realized that his creator was standing at the side. He hurriedly ran over and bowed respectfully with one hand on his chest. "I'm very sorry. I didn't notice your arrival." "No, it's nothing." Zhang Cheng waved his hand nonchalantly. "Tell me, how far has the experiment progressed?" "We can basically confirm that this is a high-level intelligent life form embryo. Even though it has yet to develop self-consciousness, it is constantly releasing energy waves to the outside world. I'm currently developing a set of encoders to try and decipher its secrets." Adam quickly gave the answer. He was so excited that when he spoke, his eyes shone with undisguised excitement and fanaticism. "If I want to devour it, do you have any good ideas?" Zhang Cheng was obviously not interested in the so-called encoders. He directly asked his question. "Devour it?" Adam opened his eyes wide in disbelief. "No, please do not devour it. You and it are on a completely different level in terms of energy level. If we compare the energy level that you possess to a gaseous state, then it represents the most powerful solid state. Once you complete the fusion, it will definitely not be you devouring it. It is more likely that it will devour you. But you just said that it has no independent consciousness." Zhang Cheng subconsciously frowned. "Yes, I said that. But this is not a matter of consciousness. It is a matter of the essence of life. Simply put, a life form like it, regardless of whether it has consciousness or not, will be led by it during the fusion process. Even if your consciousness is lucky enough to take the initiative, it will slowly be influenced and assimilated. In the end, you will become it and not you. But if my consciousness can resist these influences, won't I still be myself? I'll give you 2 months to design a fusion plan. I need its power." Chapter 855. In an ordinary house in Washington, D.C., United States, Bernard was busy packing with his wife. They were preparing to move out of this place and hide in the prepared house. As one of the most hated intelligence organizations in the world, working for the CIA meant that they might be targeted by hostile countries or even terrorists. If they were not careful, not only would they die, but their family would also be implicated. In fact, the CIA often dealt with disobedient spies. The simplest and most direct way was to expose their identity. Then they didn't need to do it themselves. Those enemies would naturally find the opportunity to finish the job that the CIA was responsible for. This was why almost all spies were willing to work for the country, not individuals or small intelligence organizations. Because only the country could ensure that their identity would not be leaked and that the safety of their family and friends would not be threatened. Looking at the luggage being moved one after another, Bernard took a deep breath and looked up to ask his colleague, standing next to him, "Where are you going to send me this time?" "Sorry, buddy, you should know the rules. Before we arrive at the destination, I can't tell you anything." A bald black man shrugged helplessly and refused. Then what about the mysterious organization? Bernard was obviously a little unwilling to give up as he narrowed his eyes and continued to ask. "So far, we don't know anything. We only know that they are terrifyingly powerful, especially the method of transporting nuclear warheads to any corner of the world, which made the entire White House and the Pentagon uneasy. It can be said that we are in big trouble this time. The black man sighed slightly and explained. It had to be said that this time, Zhang Qing's crazy behavior directly scared the entire elite class of the United States. It was one thing to deal with a country group like the Soviet Union, and another thing to deal with a mysterious organization of unknown origin. During the Cold War, although the two super factions have been testing each other crazily on the edge of destruction, the former, as an enormous country, would abide by the minimum international standards no matter what and would not casually drag the entire civilization of mankind down with it. However, no matter how one looked at it, Zhang Qing's actions did not seem rational. Because anyone with a little bit of rationality would not choose to sell nuclear warheads to religious extremist terrorists and directly throw a big mushroom on the head of the United States military. Not only did he shoot and kill a high-ranking military official, but he also threatened to destroy the United States with hundreds of nuclear warheads, forcing the government to sign a series of unequal treaties. What was even more frightening was that after the incident, they didn't mind the chaos and posted the complete video on the internet. Right now, almost every government and citizen of every country knew that the United States, the most powerful country in the world, could also feel fear and would submit to an enemy stronger than itself. This strong contrast and image blow shook the single-level world order established by the United States after the end of the Cold War and ended the myth of the United States military as the strongest military organization on Earth. As the most direct manifestation of this, the price of weapons-grade nuclear materials and suitcase nuclear bombs on the black market instantly soared by more than 20 times. Especially those terrorist organizations that hated the United States so much that they wanted to transport these weapons of mass destruction into the United States and make big news in the most populated areas. In just a few days, Customs and Border Patrol had caught several suspicious individuals trying to bring weapons-grade nuclear materials into the UA. All of a sudden, the U.S. government and various law enforcement agencies realized the seriousness of the problem and raised the alert level by another level. Sigh, I hope it won't cause a serious disaster in the end. Bernard sighed, picked up the last cardboard box, walked into the car, and waved to the agent in charge of driving. After the latter received the instruction, he immediately started the car and drove straight to the southwest along the road. About half an hour later, just as he was thinking about what went wrong with his carefully prepared plan, why the spy satellite was hijacked, and where his identity was exposed, the car suddenly made a 180-degree turn and stopped on the empty suburban road. An old man with meticulously combed hair got out of another car parked on the side of the road and greeted with a smile. "Good morning, dear old friend. I believe you still remember me. You are Leonid, the former director of the KGB's South American Intelligence Search Department." Bernard thought for a moment and quickly connected the other party with some old files in his memory. As the most powerful enemy of the CIA in the past, he would not easily forget the senior officials who once worked for the KGB. "Yes, it's me. I didn't expect that after the collapse of the Soviet Union, you would climb to your current position so quickly. How is it? Our recent little actions have caused you a lot of trouble, right?" Leonid pursed his lips and revealed a smug smile. "Recently? Damn it. So you are the one behind all this?" Bernard's face suddenly changed, and he subconsciously reached for his gun. But before he could pull out the gun, he suddenly found a man standing behind his wife, and this man was holding an electronic screen in his hand. The screen was playing the image of his son and daughter working. Instantly, he realized that all his relatives had been controlled. If he made any excessive moves, then whether it was his wife, son, daughter, or grandson, they would all be killed. Bernard suppressed the anger and unwillingness in his heart and asked in a slightly trembling voice, "You madman, what do you want me to do?" "Ha, it's simple. I want to recruit you and give you the honor of working for the master." Leonid straightforwardly stated the purpose of this trip. That's right. He wanted to plant a spy inside the CIA to ensure that he could get first-hand information at any time. "Master?" You are working for someone, not your own country? Bernard's eyes revealed a trace of surprise, and he did not rush to refuse. An old fox like him would not easily give up any opportunity to inquire about information. Yes, I have pledged allegiance to him, and I will never betray him. In addition, I also advise you not to have any thoughts and honestly become a member of the organization. Otherwise, I will let you know the painful price of disobeying us. Oh yes, the Master is also quite influential in the UA and can even get us legal entry status. Otherwise, how can I easily avoid the eyes of a series of departments, including the CIA, the FBI, and the Department of Homeland Security, and stand on this road waiting for your arrival? Chapter 856. To be able to climb to a high position second only to the director and deputy director of the CIA, Bernard naturally couldn't be an idiot who didn't know anything. On the contrary, it took him less than a minute to figure out the huge conspiracy behind the whole thing. First of all, no more than 5 people in the entire bureau knew that he went to the house, so it was 100% certain that he was betrayed by an insider. Secondly, the information of his relatives was also very confidential, and only a few people were qualified to access it, so it was also done by someone with very high authority. Finally, and most importantly, the United States had privately raised its security alert to the highest level. Whether it was the customs or the border, they had begun to follow the principle of killing the wrong person rather than letting the wrong person go. Every person who entered the United States was strictly checked. If there was even the slightest sign of something wrong, all necessary actions would be taken. Normally, not to mention a former senior KGB employee, even ordinary people from Eastern Europe and the Middle East would be strictly investigated. If there was even the slightest doubt, they would be denied entry. Only internal high-level officials could use their privileges to allow them to pass through. After figuring this out, Bernard sighed with a wry smile. Well, it seems that I don't have a second choice, do I? But before I join, can I ask the last 2 questions? Of course. Please. Leonid made a gesture of invitation. First, what is the purpose of the organization? Or, to put it another way, what is your purpose? Second, who is the so-called master you're talking about? Bernard asked the biggest question in his heart without hesitation. He still couldn't understand how such a powerful intelligence organization could be established so quietly. Not to mention other things, just the amount of money invested to maintain daily operations was a large sum of money, at least a few billion USD. Leonid touched his temples and replied meaningfully. Our purpose at this stage is to develop and grow rapidly and insert our tentacles into every corner of the world. We have no special ambitions. To put it simply, we provide a variety of intelligence services for the master. In addition, we are free most of the time, and we can do whatever we want. There is no control, no monitoring, and no endless suspicion. How about it? Doesn't it sound very tempting? What? Are you kidding? Bernard's eyes widened, and his face showed an expression of disbelief. Kidding? No, I never joke. Leonid shook his head with a smile. Master's power and generosity are far beyond your imagination. He could give you everything you wanted, and he could also give you power that was only below 10,000 people. If I had to use a word to describe him, it would be the omnipotent God. *T. Your current behavior makes me feel like I'm about to join a cult that's not very clear-headed. Bernard frowned and carefully observed the reactions of the others around him. However, to his surprise, the other people did not react in the slightest. It was as if they had tacitly agreed with the exaggerated description. This is not normal. It was too abnormal. Don't worry, my dear friend. As long as you nod your head now, I can show you right away. Leonid took 2 steps back and stood in the middle of the road. Bernard was obviously hesitating. On the one hand, he didn't want to betray the CIA that he had worked for all his life. On the other hand, he wasn't sure if he would be used to death by the other party and then casually abandoned after joining a strange organization. Don't think that this is a scene that only happens in Hollywood movies. In the real intelligence war, many unlucky people were deceived and easily believed the promises from the enemy. As a result, they were constantly forced to risk their lives to steal important information. Once exposed, let alone rescue, they would be directly abandoned one by one. The better ones might be locked up for interrogation, and it was not unusual for them to be almost killed by their own people. Espionage had always been a high-risk, super exciting profession, so finding a strong backer was more important than anything else. As for loyalty and service to the country, at most, it was used to deceive rookies who had just entered the industry. Those who had been in the industry for more than 10 years would never be loyal to anyone. They would only be loyal to themselves. This was one of the reasons why the number of double agents was increasing. But unfortunately, generally speaking, only children had the right to choose in the true sense, and adults usually didn't have a choice. At least for Bernard, the so-called choice did not exist at all. Unless he wanted to watch his wife and children be killed, the only way was to join. Without much hesitation, he handed over the pistol and said with a smile, "I'm in. From now on, we are on the same team." "Very good. I promise you made a choice to fight for it. Now, it's time to let you see our true strength." Leonid raised his right arm and waved. Woo, woo, woo. With the loud noise of the engine working, a Quinjet in an invisible state revealed its true face. Optical invisibility, radar invisibility, vertical takeoff and landing. When it appeared in Bernard's field of vision, the CIA senior fell into a state of sluggishness. He couldn't believe that the advanced fighter that even the art complex couldn't make was developed by an unknown organization. Not only was it developed, but it also seemed to have been put into actual combat. "Come on, I'll take you to the headquarters and do a little loyalty test. As one of my men once told you, our eyes are everywhere." After saying this pretentious sentence, Leonid went straight to the plane and waved to his men. After a while, except for the truck full of furniture, appliances, and daily necessities, the rest of the cars and people were stuffed into the cabin and then left, ignoring the UA radar system. The entire process did not trigger a single radar station or satellite hovering in space orbit. Bernard, who saw this scene with his own eyes, sighed secretly and muttered to himself, "Everywhere. It seems that this is not just a joke. In fact, as long as we want, we can invade and hijack all the satellites and the entire internet in outer space at any time. In front of us, there are no secrets in the world of ordinary people. I will support you to sit in the position of the CIA director and then extend your sphere of influence into all aspects of the UA government. I hope you don't have too many unnecessary emotions. Don't worry, I am a selfish person. I will not sacrifice my own life and the lives of my family for the country. That's the best. The master likes smart people who can adapt to the situation. If there's a chance, I will introduce you to him." Chapter 857. In the dark secret room, 13 candles filled with magic were slowly burning. The people sitting in front of the candles also remained silent as they stared at the old man sitting in the main seat. There was no doubt that they were not mentally ill people, nor were they role-playing game enthusiasts. They were the 13 members of the North American Supreme Council. As the speaker, Cosmo first coughed and then said unhurriedly, "I believe you must be wondering why I suddenly summoned you for an emergency meeting. In fact, it's not that I want to call for a meeting, but the Supreme Council jointly sent an emergency notice saying that an organization is trying to threaten the UA government with nuclear weapons and asked us to take care of it." "Nuclear weapons?" Lafren's expression changed slightly as he subconsciously glanced at Zhang Cheng from the corner of his eye. He would not forget the powerful nuclear warhead that was detonated during the last joint operation. "That's right. Although I don't think this matter will develop to the point of no return, since the Supreme Council jointly issued a warning, we should discuss a little about how to calm the situation down." The speaker gently tapped the table with his finger as he explained. Due to the fierce conflict he had with some of the members, the atmosphere of the meeting was slightly unfriendly. Almost half of the people kept their mouths shut and did not even bother to say a word. It was obvious that they did not intend to intervene. In fact, most of the members did not have much interest in nuclear weapons. As long as the ordinary people's government did not go crazy and plant mushrooms all over the world, they could not be bothered with the filth between countries. "Then you mean?" Lafren's pupils flashed with a trace of divine radiance as he asked. Cosmo hesitated for a few seconds and quickly responded, "What I mean is send someone to do a simple investigation. If there is no danger of an all-out nuclear war, ignore it. If there is, then uproot the organization." "Understood. Leave this matter to me." Lafern took the initiative to step forward and take on the task. His purpose was very clear, which was to clean up the mess of the most suspicious ally and ensure that it was not discovered by outsiders. "Oh, are you sure?" Cosmo raised his eyebrows in surprise. As one of the most senior members of the North American Supreme Council, Lafern had always been known for being a loner and reclusive. He rarely took on any tasks, so he smelled something unusual. Lafern nodded. "Yes, I'm sure. It's time for these old bones of mine to get some exercise. Otherwise, many people will forget my name." "Ha ha, you really know how to joke. I guarantee that even if all the old guys of our generation are dead, those few families that have been struck by lightning will still remember your great name." The chairman laughed and joked. "I hope so. If there's nothing else, I'll take my leave." With that, Lafern stood up from a chair and bowed slightly. Then he disappeared into thin air, and the candles on the table went out automatically. The remaining people followed closely behind. They chose to stand up and leave one after another, and each of them went about their own business. It wasn't long before the entire chamber was completely empty, and it was completely enveloped in darkness. At the same time in Long Island, New York, Zhang Cheng, who had just returned home through teleportation magic, poured a glass of honey wine for Lafern, who was sitting on the sofa, and asked with a faint smile, "You appear to my house to ask if I was the one behind that organization, right? You're always so smart. Don't worry, I'm not here to condemn you. I just want to know the truth and then decide how to deal with it." Lafern raised his glass and drank it in one gulp. There was a hint of playfulness in his eyes. "Okay, I admit that this organization is indeed under my control." Zhangqing admitted openly. He knew that there was no point in lying at this time. With the power that Lafern had, it was only a matter of time before he found out the truth. It was better to be honest. "Why do you want to do this? Isn't being a member of the Supreme Council of the Underground World not enough to satisfy you?" Lafern looked confused and puzzled. "No, you've misunderstood. I just want to get my own intelligence network so that it's convenient to search and investigate some information. As for this bold action, it's mainly because the U.S. government always flies around in front of me like an annoying fly. I was impatient and taught them a small lesson." Zhang Cheng gave a half-truth explanation. "I see. I know how to deal with it." Lafern nodded thoughtfully, put down the empty glass, and turned to leave. Watching him go through the portal and disappear completely, Zhang Cheng sneered and muttered to himself, "I don't know if it's an illusion or not, but the situation in this world is starting to go out of control. It seems that my plan has to speed up." As soon as his voice trailed off, a note written on a parchment suddenly appeared in his palm out of thin air. It was written in the ancient demonic language. "The war has begun. The time to conquer hell is ripe." It's finally begun. It's time to show my trump card and take these two worlds that are closely connected to Earth into my pocket as a war and logistics base. After saying this, Zhangqing instantly set the coordinates. He directly tore through space and arrived at the bustling hell. Before he had time to appreciate the bustling scene around him, Volini hurried to him and reported at a very fast speed the latest news. The demon army and the angel army have finally broken out into an all-out war. In less than 2 days, millions of demons and angels have died. Now that the entire hell has issued a summons, almost all the lords have personally led their armies to join in. It's time to give them a fatal blow from the back. Almighty Master, please allow me to lead the vanguard to attack the city for you. This world will belong to the army." A demon lord moved his huge body and roared loudly. Chaos, war, slaughter, and death. All of this made every nerve in his body in a state of extreme excitement. The burning evil fire above his head was even higher and more vigorous than usual. "No, you should leave it to me. I swear, I will definitely present you with a glorious victory." The other Dreadlord also hurriedly expressed his loyalty. Although at the very beginning, These guys had no choice but to agree to Zhang Cheng's conditions in exchange for a chance to be resurrected. But as the whole plan progressed, they quickly realized that breaking away from the powerful rule of the Dark Titan Sardras and the Deceiver Kill Jaden was actually not entirely a bad thing. At least their status had been raised, and they could still do what they liked to do the most. Especially the upcoming war, which was 100% in line with the intentions of this group of evil, dark, bloodthirsty, and tyrannical monsters. Therefore, their feelings of resistance were not strong. Instead, they had an impulse to try. Chapter 858. The City of Blood, Carmela, was the most peculiar city in the entire region. It was not far from the city of Vera, less than a 15-day journey. However, it was a very important transportation hub, and it also ruled over a large area of the surrounding territory. Most importantly, the ruler of this city was not an ordinary demon, but an accidental product of a cruel experiment by the great demon kings. His name was Sharia, a unique life form that relied on sucking blood to survive. That's right, this guy was the true ancestor of all vampires on Earth. Be it Cain mentioned in religious legends, or the famous Impaler Duke Dracula, they had all obtained a drop of his blood by chance. As a secondary demon king, his power was undoubtedly very strong, especially in the City of Blood. Unless the tens of millions of tons of blood stored underground were used up, no one could kill him. However, for some reason, Sharia felt uneasy today. At first, he thought that it might be due to the reigniting of the flames of war with the forces of heaven, but he quickly denied this answer. The reason was simple. Hell and heaven were like a pair of enemies. Ever since they discovered each other's existence, they've been fighting with each other almost all the time. They were very clear about each other's strength. For example, heaven was very clear that ever since the few old demon kings had all died, the so-called demon kings that hell elected later had less than 1/10 of the former strength. Even the treasured sword that symbolized the Lord of Hell could not be pulled out by anyone. By the same logic, Hell also knew that the God of heaven who called himself God had also died tragically in the ancient war. Only his heart had been snatched back. The few archangels were either dead or crippled. Now, there was only one who could take the lead. Normally, in such a situation, as long as both sides were rational, they would not start an all-out war. Instead, they would recuperate and slowly recover their strength. After all, the greatest advantage of angels and demons was that their lifespans were much longer than humans. The strongest humans could only live for 100 or 200 years at most, but they could easily live for thousands of years. The longer they drag it out, the more advantageous it would be for heaven and hell. But now, for some reason, the game of probing each other at the border had suddenly become intense. Both the angels and demons seemed to have gone crazy, constantly gathering their strength in an attempt to get rid of each other. Perhaps in the eyes of the other demons, the cause of this war was the angels pushing their luck and breaking the unspoken rules that both sides had always followed. However, Sharia, who was always good at thinking, felt that something was wrong. Just as he sat on the throne, tasting the fresh blood he had just taken from the beautiful girl and hesitating whether to go to the border and join this war that was likely to last for a long time, a demon with only half an arm suddenly rushed in and shouted at the top of his voice, Not good. Honorable Lord of Fresh Blood. Those guys from Vera City are coming. What? What did you say? Repeat yourself. Sharia abruptly stood up from his chair. His two strange eyes shot out a terrifying red light. But before the one-armed demon could explain, a deafening battle cry came from outside. Then, a green demonic fireball suddenly fell from the sky, smashing the roof of the palace with a bang. It turned into a huge hellfire and began to destroy everything around it. Bastard! How dare they? Sharia raised his hand and drew a large amount of blood from under the throne. He then threw it out and swallowed the hellfire. In just a few seconds, the evil fire on the behemoth had completely disappeared, turning it into a pile of lifeless rocks that scattered everywhere. Anger. Uncontrollable anger. He never dreamed that the barren land, which was known as a remote and desolate place, would dare to attack him at this time. But before this lesser demon king could figure out the reason, a huge abyssal lord suddenly descended from the sky and crushed the entire palace with a bang. He waved the huge weapon in his hand and grinned as he cheered, "Ah ha ha ha! A real prey. I'm lucky." As soon as his voice trailed off, he raised his double-ended sword and slashed down fiercely. Asterisk bang. Asterisk, along with the dust and rubble that filled the air, even the walls and the throne were split into two by this attack. It could be said that in the Burning Legion, no one was better at killing and destroying than the Abyssal Lords. They were like born lunatics, their minds filled with the desire to fight and completely without the slightest fear of death. But unfortunately, Sharia was very fast. He had already moved about 6 meters to the side and just avoided the attack. However, he was not in a hurry to launch a counterattack. Instead, he narrowed his eyes and observed the behemoth standing in front of him. After a while, he asked, "Who are you? How come I've never seen a demon like you in hell?" "I'm the great Abyssal Lord Asgalor. Tremble, lowly worm. I'll chop off your head and present it to my master. Victory and glory to the Legion." The Abyssal Lord raised his left hand and began to guide the magical energy. After a short few seconds, overwhelming demonic fireballs fell from the sky and began to attack indiscriminately within a radius of hundreds of meters. And every fireball that fell would turn into a blazing hellfire puppet. Just in terms of the scale of war and experience, hell could not catch up to the Burning Legion that had destroyed countless worlds. Seeing his city being destroyed by a group of invaders without restraint, Sharia finally could no longer control the anger in his heart. He raised his hands and shouted, "You've made a mistake. A huge mistake. You shouldn't have provoked me. Now have a taste of the true power of Blood City." The dilapidated palace was suddenly lifted up by the blood gushing out from the ground. The blood began to gather above the city at an unbelievable speed, slowly forming a large red cloud-like thing. The next second, the blood that contained an astonishing amount of magical energy fell like raindrops. These raindrops were like sharp swords, instantly killing thousands of low-level demons. Even many hellfire demons that were more resilient fell to the ground as they ran out of energy. In comparison, the Abyssal Lord Asgalor's condition was slightly better. There were only a few small wounds on his body, and the blood that was filled with raging flames flowed out of the wounds. Any creature that came into contact with the blood would instantly be burned to ashes. He glanced at his injuries and sneered sarcastically. "Is this all you've got? Sorry, it can only tickle me. Don't be hasty. The real feast is coming soon." Sharia's raised right hand suddenly fell. A huge spear formed from blood and energy fell from the sky and pierced through the Abyssal Lord's body. Its flame-like blood immediately went out of control and exploded with a boom, engulfing everything within a radius of hundreds of meters. Chapter 859. Asterisk boom. Asterisk as the blinding evil fire soared into the sky. The entire central palace of Blood City completely disappeared from the map. Zhang Cheng, who was standing outside the city, saw this scene and said in a casual tone, "Looks like things are not far from what you expected. Asgalor, that idiot, is dead after all. But it doesn't matter. As long as there are enough souls, I can resurrect him no matter how many times he dies." As soon as he finished speaking, he flipped open the commanding demon codex and lightly touched it. Instantly, including Asgalor, the Lord of the Abyss, all the demons of the Burning Legion that died in the attack were resurrected. Yes, just like in the world of Azeroth, to kill demons, one had to stand in the distorted void or some other special place. They could not be truly killed in hell. If they were destroyed by the enemy in battle, their souls would return to the Book of Command and wait for the Master of the Book to consume their souls to resurrect them. This also meant that unless the enemy had the ability to directly damage and destroy souls, no matter how many times they were killed, it would not reduce the number of the fearsome legion. Instead, it would increase as the number of demons that were transformed by the evil powers increased. Perhaps in all the worlds that Zhang Cheng had experienced, Only the demons of the abyss that symbolized chaos and the demons of hell that symbolized order in the multiverse where the Farron continent was located could be compared to them. That despicable little worm. How dare you hurt the great Asgalar? As a high-level demon of the Burning Legion that died in the first full-scale war in this world, the Lord of the Abyss felt deeply humiliated. Without another word, he led a large group of cannon fodders through the fallen city gate and charged toward Sharia, who was controlling blood and killing above the ruins of the palace. Due to the violent explosion caused by his death, a large part of this lesser demon lord with the title of Lord of Blood was severely burned. Some parts could not even be healed by absorbing blood. This was because the evil flames were not ordinary magical flames. They were extremely corrosive. Not only would they cause damage far beyond ordinary flames, they would also distort and devour magical energy, turning it into a part of themselves. In fact, the reason why the Burning Legion was able to develop and grow was entirely because of the ancient nomadic conquest and plunder. By conquering planets with life in the universe, the natives and even the planets themselves would be corrupted by powerful dark energy, eventually providing the Legion with an endless supply of soldiers, war materials, and energy. As for what would happen to the planet after its resources and energy were exhausted, it would naturally be abandoned by the army and become a barren dead planet. To a certain extent, the dark energy created by the Dark Titan Sargeras was the core of the entire Burning Legion. Without the help of dark powers, the army was like a beast that had lost its fangs and claws. While it would not be reduced to a third-rate force, it would definitely shrink significantly. So from the very beginning, Zhang Cheng did not restrict the spread of dark powers in this world. Instead, he hid in the dark and added fuel to the fire. Right now, he was the source of all the dark energy and shadows in the world, and as the scope of the war expanded, he would slowly become stronger. Feeling the two types of energy boiling in his body, he smiled and muttered to himself, "Maybe after this war is over, I can try to improve my control of energy." Warrant, who was standing at the side, obviously heard the conversation. His expression changed slightly, and he carefully probed, "You're not planning to do something dangerous, are you?" "Danger? No. As long as it succeeds, there won't be any danger." Zhang Cheng shook his head meaningfully, and then explained, "You have to understand, when a person intends to do something, but before he starts, there is always a 50% chance of success or failure. Even those plans that claim to have a 99% success rate also have a 1% chance of failure. By the same logic, plans that claim to have a 99% failure rate also have a 1% chance of success. In my opinion, before you get a definite result, the success rate is actually not that important, especially when it comes to a field that no one has touched before. It's like a box of freshly shuffled cards. You never know what card you will draw next. I think this should be categorized as gambling." The corner of Warren's mouth twitched slightly, obviously disagreeing with the fallacy. "Ha ha, my dear friend, you are too timid and too cautious. That's why you have missed so many opportunities and ended up in a dead end. I'm different from you. I'd rather fall on the path to the peak of power than see myself doing nothing, or choose to escape because of danger. I'm a surpasser. As long as there is a goal in front of me, I will never stop." After saying this meaningful sentence, Zhang Qing instantly cast a teleportation spell and disappeared without a trace. Although Sharia, the Lord of Blood, was a relatively powerful lesser demon lord, under the siege of so many high-level demons of the Burning Legion, it would not take long for him to be exhausted to death. Compared to the local battle in Blood City, he was more concerned about the overall situation and the speed of the advancement of several fronts. The purpose of the war to conquer Hades was to turn Hades into a large rear. Almost every time a territory or city was conquered, all the demons would be captured and transformed into dark energy with a success rate of less than 30%. As for the unlucky ones who died, their corpses and souls would be processed by the Dreadlords to create an endless army of the undead. It could be said that as long as they could capture more than 50% of Hades before the main forces of the demons who were fighting against the forces of heaven at the border came back to their senses, victory would be assured. Damn it! This guy is indeed an unreasonable lunatic. Voleni shuddered subconsciously, his eyes revealing a strong sense of fear. As a person who had the ability to see the future, he could never be like Zhang Cheng, who was driven by the insatiable ambition and desire in his heart to constantly climb to the top. He was used to foreseeing the future to avoid possible dangers and powerful enemies. So from the beginning, the way the two of them thought was completely different. To be precise, Voleni had taken a fancy to Zhang Cheng's great power and future, tried to use this power to better protect himself, while Zhang Cheng had also taken a fancy to Voleni's ability to foresee the future. Both of them were taking what they needed. As for their attitude towards the woman who called herself the creator, they both showed different degrees of vigilance or hostility. As the saying goes, the enemy of an enemy is a friend. Whether it was Zhang Cheng or Voleni, they needed to face the biggest threat first before they had the chance to consider whether to kill the other party and enjoy the fruits of victory alone. Chapter 860. Attack. Attack. Don't stop. The Legion is invincible. Quick, summon Hellfire. We need more Hellfire to tear down the enemy's defense line. Shadow Mages. We need the support of long-range magic. Fire the Darksider cannons. Tear these lowly red-skinned bastards apart. The teleportation portal is ready. Warpoint battle begins. 6th and 7th Battalions, follow me. With a massive war machine that was the Burning Legion in full swing, in less than 48 hours, the entire backline of Inferno was in complete chaos. Especially with the advanced technology of long-range teleportation portals, the Legion could attack any target that they deemed valuable or easy to destroy. This also meant that as long as the teleportation portals at 2 locations were completed, the Endless Army could bypass the front and arrive at the enemy's rear in an instant. With a precise and ruthless assault, the enemy's seemingly solid defense line would be destroyed. After all, so many Dreadlords and Succubus had infiltrated many places some time ago, and some had even climbed to more important positions with their bootlicking skills. Secretly building a few temporary teleportation portals was easier than eating and drinking. In addition, with the first round of attack, they had completed control of the important transportation hubs, and the Legion had separated most of the lords from each other, making it impossible for them to gather together and form a real, effective resistance. Over time, hundreds of demon lords were killed. Almost the same number of demon lords chose to surrender, accept the transformation of the Darksider cannons, and join the Legion as the vanguard to conquer Inferno. As the saying went, the most vicious and brutal were often the traitors who surrendered to the enemy. These fellows who were transformed after surrendering knew what would happen to them if they were captured by the Dreadlords, so each of them desperately led their men to attack the city, using all kinds of sinister means. By the time the Inferno army gathered at the border reacted, the Legion's vanguard had already approached the heart of Inferno, the birthplace of the former strongest Dreadlord of Inferno, Demonic City, which had more than 5 million permanent residents. Admiring the spires that were more than 1,000 meters tall and countless majestic and huge stone buildings in the distance, Succubus Ren could not help but lick her seductive red lips as she praised softly. What a spectacular sight! I can't wait to launch an all-out attack and completely conquer this city or destroy it. Don't rush. Now is not the best time to attack the city. My plan was to set up a battle formation here and wait for those so-called Demon Kings to lead their armies back. Then, we would launch a decisive battle of unprecedented scale on this plain. As long as we agree to this war, the entire infernal realm will be ours, Zhang Cheng replied calmly. Master, in terms of military strength, I'm afraid we don't have the advantage in this battle. Besides, those annoying angels might interfere and wait until both sides are injured before jumping out to take advantage of the situation. A Dreadlord hurriedly stood out to make his presence known. As members of the Void faction that had been incorporated by the Dark Titan Sargeras, these vampire bats were darker than any other species. They were good at grasping and analyzing people's psychological activities, then finding their weaknesses and controlling them. Unless it was an emotionless undead, Almost nothing could escape their corrosion. Zhang Cheng glanced at this guy and asked with a faint smile, "How do you know that this is all of our forces? Could it be that you have other trump cards?" Fear Fiend King's eyes glowed with interest. "Of course. I've been preparing for this war for a long time. Don't worry, no matter what trump cards those Demon Kings have, I guarantee that they won't have the slightest chance of winning. As for you and your brothers, what you need to do is to continue gathering information for me and create friction, hatred, and conflict within the enemy." Zhang Cheng calmly made his request. If there was a demon race that he was most wary of in the entire Burning Legion, it would definitely be Nazresm, also known as the Dreadlord. The reason was simple. These guys had no loyalty at all. Back when they were hatched by the distorted void, they had almost joined forces with the ancient gods to corrupt an unawakened titan into an extremely terrifying creature. Fortunately, Sargeras saw it and took action in time. Otherwise, the following script might not have been a civil war between the titans, but a war between the distorted void and the pantheon for the control of the universe. But later, when these Nazresm discovered Sargeras' strength, they immediately betrayed the distorted void without any moral integrity and joined the Burning Legion as the Dark Titan's aides and advisors. So to a certain extent, rather than saying that they were loyal to the Burning Legion, it was more accurate to say that they worshipped powerful forces. If Zhang Cheng were to encounter an enemy stronger than himself one day, then these guys would most likely do something in private, or even backstab him in the name of justice. Then, they would take the credit and seek refuge with a new master. In comparison, the bad-tempered abyssal lords were easier to control. As long as their desire for slaughter, destruction was satisfied, there was no need to worry about rebellion. The Dreadlord obviously didn't know what Zhang Cheng thought of him, and continued to flatter him. "You're really the most meticulous person I've ever met in my life, and the best at planning wars. Please allow me to express my heartfelt admiration for you and observe a moment of silence for those who became your enemies. They'll never know that their failure was destined from the start. But I'm curious. Our enemy seems to have a large flying force. How do you plan to deal with it?" "Hee. Of course, we'll use the same flying force. Believe me, you'll be amazed when you see them with your own eyes. All right, instead of wasting time here, why don't we hurry up and take action? I need you and your brothers to weaken the enemy as much as possible before the war begins." With that, Zhang Cheng pretended to be impatient and waved his hand, indicating that the Dreadlord could leave. "As you wish." Seeing that he couldn't get any valuable answers, the Dreadlord immediately placed one hand on his chest and bowed deeply, before turning around and disappearing into the busy army. Not long after he left, Voleni reminded, "Be careful. These guys with bat wings aren't on the same side as you. I'm very clear about that. Tell me, what are our chances of winning this war?" Zhang Cheng asked curiously while stroking his chin. "Do you still need to ask? Can't you see that I'm still standing here with no intention of running away?" Voleni revealed a meaningful smile, and even took out a dagger with a dragon engraved on it to trim his nails. The meaning behind his words was self-evident. Chapter 861. In less than 78 hours, Heaven and Hell, who were still fighting fiercely at the border, signed a truce agreement. Then the assembled army of Hell turned around and headed directly in the direction of the Demon City, intending to eradicate these rebels who wanted to seize power in one fell swoop. The Angel Corps was on standby at the border, and no one knew what they were up to. No one realized that this time it was not as simple as a rebellion, but a long-planned invasion and conquest by force. The Dreadlords who had sneaked into the enemy's ranks had long sent out information about the Infernal Army and even stirred up some friction and conflict from time to time. By the time the army arrived at the scheduled battlefield, the Burning Legion, led by Zhang Cheng, had already completed all the arrangements. Not only had they seized the advantageous terrain in advance, but they had also placed thousands of demonic cannons at the most threatening heights. It could be said that the outcome of this war was already quite obvious before it had even begun. In particular, the few Dreadlords who stood at the top of Hell found that they were not facing a motley crew from the barren land as they had expected. They immediately gathered together to discuss countermeasures. We've been deceived. Yes, that female demon lord called Nisa deceived all of us. Where is she now? She escaped. She disappeared in a head-on collision with the Angel Corps long before the news came back. Obviously, Nisa is not the mastermind behind this. With her pathetic strength, it is not enough to command such a huge army. Then who is the mastermind behind this? Don't tell me we don't even know who our opponent is when the decisive battle is about to begin. Sorry, we really don't know. The Barren Land has always been an unvalued place, and was even regarded as a place of exile. The only thing we know is that this guy is quite ambitious and powerful, and even dares to challenge us directly. Then what should we do now? Admit his status and rule, and avoid war first? No, we can't admit it. Once we admit it, it means announcing to the whole hell that we are no match for him. Since we can't negotiate, let's fight first. Anyway, the rule of hell has been separation for thousands of years. At worst, we can consider surrendering after losing the war. As long as he wants to be the master of hell, he won't dare to do anything to us. Yes, the Angel Corps is still eyeing us from the border. Even if we lose the war, he still needs our strength to prevent the invasion of heaven. Moreover, we may not necessarily lose this war. While the Hell Demon Kings were discussing how to win this battle, Zhang Cheng was sitting in the military and listening to a Fear Demon King's report. Master, according to our investigation, the enemy can be divided into 6 groups, which belong to the 6 Demon Kings. This tradition followed the ancient tradition of the 7 sovereigns of hell. However, because the strength of these 6 Demon Kings is similar, no one is able to stand out and suppress the others, so the highest position has always been left vacant. So, what we're going to face is not one army, but 6 different armies. Zhang Cheng rubbed his chin and asked thoughtfully. Of course. In fact, not only were they not subordinate to each other, but many of the feudal lords had deep conflicts and even hatred between them. When the war starts, my brothers and I will use all the means we can to intensify these conflicts and hatred. Victory will belong to the army. Fear Demon King revealed a sinister smile. Zhang Cheng listened to this and nodded with satisfaction. Well done. If the plan succeeds, I will give you the right to supervise and transform all the captives. Also, help me keep track of the movements of the 6 Demon Kings. If they want to escape, you must inform me immediately. Understand? Understood. Your will is our command. With that, Fear Demon King's huge body quickly transformed into the appearance of a hell demon, then turned and flew towards the location of the Hell Army. Watching his back gradually disappear, Zhang Cheng suddenly asked, Dear friend, I need your ability now. Tell me, among these so-called Demon Kings, which one of them has the thing that I want? If I'm not wrong, it should be Akima. It is said that she was once the direct descendant of the Demon King of Lust, Asmodeus, and knows many secrets about the ancient war. Volini gave a straightforward answer. Obviously, to him, it was not difficult to pry into a little bit of privacy. Akima? Where is she and her army now? Zhang Cheng's eyes flashed with a dangerous light. East, about 25 kilometers from us. Why? Are you going to attack early? Volini probed with an uncertain tone. No, of course not. Zhang Cheng smiled and shook his head. I just want to confirm the position of the prey, so that she won't run away. Don't worry, she won't be able to run away. Because in the script called The Future, she kneels before you and chooses to submit. You will win this war, and whether it is hell or heaven, they will all tremble before you. Volini hinted meaningfully. Don't make it sound like I'm a tyrant. If you can really see the future, you should know that I have no interest in rule and power. They are only tools to achieve the goal, not the ultimate pursuit. As he said this, Zhang Cheng's pupils kept changing colors. Sometimes it was gold, which symbolized divinity, and sometimes it was green, which symbolized dark energy, and violet, which symbolized Olympian energy. All kinds of energy of different attributes kept converging and rising in his body, slowly transforming from quantitative to qualitative. If he could eventually surpass the limit of transformation and completely merge into one, his control of energy would reach a new level. To some extent, this was more difficult than simple life form evolution, but it would also bring about a greater transformation. In order to reach the minimum requirement of devouring the light orbs, Zhang Cheng had to complete this necessary prerequisite. Voleni undoubtedly noticed the anomaly in the air around him and replied with a playful look, "You are a tyrant. Whether you're interested in power or not is in your hands. No one dares to disobey your orders, and no one dares to challenge your authority. Otherwise, they will suffer terrible retribution and even a purge. But if one day I get what I really want, I will definitely throw away all the power in my hands. There is no limit to desire. You will never get what you really want. At most, you will reach a limit similar to the ceiling. So don't deceive yourself. When you reach the top, I'm afraid you will not be much better than our self-proclaimed creator sister." Chapter 862. Tyrant, a term used to describe a despotic, cruel, and merciless ruler. Even in the stories recorded by historians and bards, some tyrants would kill their own people for no reason, just to satisfy their morbid love for blood and death. But those who had a little understanding of history knew that most tyrants in human history were actually discredited to a certain extent. For example, the famous tyrant of the ancient Roman Empire, Nero Claudius Drusus Germanicus, was actually just a cruel suppression of Christianity. So after Christianity came to power, all kinds of despicable stories were madly created just to mold him into a tyrant in people's minds. In fact, the reason why most tyrants were tyrants was because they were all failures in history. In this world, where everything was written by the victors, if they did not discredit the losers, how could they reflect the legitimacy and status of the victors? Zhang Cheng never thought of himself as a tyrant, because he did not believe that he was a failure. But he also did not try to explain too much. He just kept a smile and hid his true thoughts in the bottom of his heart. Time flew. 2 days passed in the blink of an eye. As the army of hell that had come from afar finished resting and reorganizing, the curtains of this unprecedented war quickly opened. Boom, 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 boom. As the demonic cannons at different heights finally began to show their power. In the blink of an eye, tens of thousands of green demonic fireballs rained down on the enemy's heads. There were no surprises. Nearly 100,000 low-level cannon fodder used as the first probing attack disappeared from the world under the blanket bombardment of the cannons, leaving behind an unknown substance scorched black by the flames. Fierce, cruel, inhumane, the Burning Legion only used one attack to make the infernal demon kings realize that they were not dealing with traitors at all. Instead, they were fighting with a bunch of madmen with rich battle experience. Compared to Infernal, which had lasted thousands of years of peace, the Burning Legion, which was constantly at war in the universe, was obviously more aggressive, and the quality of their commanders and soldiers was also higher. This was especially so for the Mo-Arg engineers who worked day and night to provide countless war machines for the army. They were not inferior to the top weapon designers and manufacturing experts on Earth. In less than a month, they had used the dark energy technology system as a blueprint and integrated the concepts of firearms on Earth to develop one powerful weapon after another. Although the entire army had yet to reach the point where cold weapons were no longer needed, in terms of firepower support, they were close to reaching the pinnacle. Not only were there powerful fell cannons, but there were also a large number of long-range throwers used to hurl hellfire golems. If they went all out, they would be able to destroy a large portion of the defensive formation in just a few minutes. With Hellfire as the vanguard, they would be able to tear apart the enemy's defensive line. If not for the short time, perhaps these crazy MO-ARGs could have collected enough resources to create the famous Fell Reaver. Standing next to the Fell cannons, Zhang Cheng looked down at the battle in full swing. He smiled and asked Succubus beside him, "How's the preparation of your Shadow Sorcerer Legion?" "Everything is ready. I'm just waiting for your command, my great and evil master." Ren sucked on his finger in a passionate manner, revealing a look of unsatisfied lust. "Patience. Stay patient. Now is not the time for you to take the field." Zhang Cheng pursed his lips and glanced at her. Polak, the Doomsday Sentinel, seemed to have noticed something and immediately suggested, "Master, I think it's best to order the left wing to launch a counterattack and test the enemy's strength. After all, since the beginning of the battle, they have not shown even one of their trump cards." "Don't worry, this interesting game has just begun. We're still in the stage of testing each other. I don't want it to end too early. Compared to the left wing, I'm more concerned about the war fortress floating in the air." As he spoke, Zhangqing pointed at the huge structure floating above the tens of millions of demons. It was the size of more than 20 football fields. This thing was in the shape of a standard pyramid. Its surface was pitch black and densely engraved with runes of different sizes. There would be an arched opening about every 20 meters. From afar, it looked like a huge beehive. According to the information sent back by the Dreadlord, this floating fortress is named after the Dreadlord, Leviathan. There are more than 5,000 skeletal dragons pieced together from flesh and blood living inside. Polak gave the answer with a serious face. There was no doubt that he was wary of the enemy's trump card, because even the Burning Legion would be wary of the power of the Azeroth Guardian Dragons, especially when the dragons swooped down from the sky and breathed out fatal dragon breath. No army in the world could withstand it. Skeletal dragons? How are they compared to the frost dragons awakened by the Lich King? Zhang Cheng asked with interest. I personally think that the skeletal dragons are stronger, because these skeletal dragons breathe out poisonous fog that can corrode everything. It is far more deadly than the frost dragon's winter breath. I agree. According to the information sent back by the Dreadlords, the yellow poisonous fog is extremely corrosive. Even a demon lord would die if he breathed in it. It was rare for Polak and Ren to not argue. Instead, they gave the same evaluation. If that's the case, why don't we destroy this thing first? As he spoke, Zhang Cheng raised his supreme authority and began to frantically gather and extract the magical energy contained in the surrounding air. In the blink of an eye, a terrifying energy vortex visible to the naked eye had formed with him as the center. Such an obvious change could be clearly felt by anyone who was not blind. Therefore, the Dreadlords immediately revealed their first trump card, which was to mobilize all the skeletal dragons in the floating fortress and fly towards the fell cannons. They were very large in size, each at least 50 to 60 meters long. Their bodies were covered in a pale yellow fog and were extremely ugly. A normal person would probably vomit at a glance. However, these terrifying behemoths were not only disgusting, but also had sharp bone spurs at almost all of their joints. One could imagine how painful it would feel to be caught by them. When they flew over the army's position, these skeletal dragons suddenly began to descend and swoop down. They aimed at the place where the soldiers were the most concentrated and breathed out deadly poisonous gas. In an instant, more than 150,000 Burning Legion cannon fodder were directly turned into a large pool of sticky black and yellow liquid. Before they could even scream, their souls had already returned to the demonic commanding codex. Chapter 863. It's not acid, but a kind of negative energy. Seeing his army being massacred by the enemy, Zhang Cheng did not show the slightest bit of anger or nervousness. Instead, he showed a look of interest. For him, these cannon fodders that he could summon were as many as he wanted, and he did not have to worry about the number of soldiers. To be able to use hundreds of thousands of cannon fodders to force the enemy to reveal their trump card was a huge gain. In the cold weapons era of human history, there were rarely any large-scale battles with more than 100,000 people. The reason was simple. Due to the limitations of communication, it was a miracle for a commander to be able to command 10 to 20,000 people in the cold weapons era. As for more, they could only give one or two simple orders, such as advance, retreat, and hold their ground, and then let the low-level officers do whatever they wanted. Many times, when the two sides were tangled together, even the most brilliant commander could not carry out his tactical ideas, let alone achieve the so-called micro-operations like in real-time strategy games. This was also why the war in the cold weapons era was always full of accidents and classic examples of the weak defeating the strong. And after the invention of radio, firearms began to dominate the war, and there were almost no examples of the weak defeating the strong. Basically, they relied on their own powerful industrial and scientific strength to crush the enemy. Although the Burning Legion was not completely in the cold weapons era and had a lot of dark energy technology, but to command an army of millions was still a fantasy. In fact, the military system of the Burning Legion was mainly adjusted by the middle-level and high-level demon commanders who commanded the low-level soldiers, and almost completely relied on experience and subjective judgment. This also meant that the millions of soldiers of the Burning Legion were no different from the enemy in essence. They were all scattered sand, and more or less deaths would not have a decisive impact on the situation. What could really determine the direction of the war was the top strategic troops or weapons like these cadaver dragons. "Master, do you need my Shadow Mage squad to attack?" Succubus Wren's pupils suddenly contracted, and her face was full of vigilance, because the overwhelming number of cadaver dragons had obviously given her a strong sense of danger. If they were allowed to rush over, then the entire demonic cannon base would be destroyed. No need. Since our opponent had already revealed his first trump card, I naturally had to reveal my own as well. After all, against dragons are still the best. Just as he finished speaking, Zhang Cheng held the supreme authority in one hand, and the other hand pulled out a 2-meter-long black cylinder from his magic waste bag. It was a gift from the woman who claimed to be the creator not long ago. In the blink of an eye, a terrifying force tore the sky apart and established a passage connecting it to the Tower of Time and Space. The dragon whelps that had been waiting for a long time immediately swarmed out. Like a huge black cloud, they instantly occupied the sky above their heads. Especially under the leadership of the Black Onyxia and Kulo Kelba, they directly attacked the unprepared cadaver dragons. Countless scorching dragon breaths intersected in the air, forming an airtight isolation zone. Any unlucky person who accidentally rushed and would be incinerated in just a few seconds, turning into charred bones that fell from the sky. Although many cadaver dragons tried to fight back with their poisonous gas, the high temperature vaporized the gas before it could get close. In addition, there were not many of them, so they were soon surrounded and hunted down. Especially the dragon whelps that Zhang Cheng had modified. Not only were they mixed with the bloodlines of Azeroth's black dragons, void dragons, and blue dragons, but they also had the bloodlines of Farron Continent's red dragons, white dragons, green dragons, and silver dragons. Every one of them grew at an astonishing speed, especially the energy attribute of their breath. It was enough to make most enemies tremble in fear. Now, under the leadership of their parents, they charged at the enemy in a crushing manner, enjoying the thrill of destruction and killing. But the army of hell was not to be trifled with. They immediately mobilized the long-range attack troops and began to aim at the dragon whelps that were not flying high enough or liked to dive to attack the ground. They shot out deadly enchanted arrows. Many of the dragon whelps screamed and fell after being hit, and were torn to pieces by the demons that swarmed over. In an instant, these giant beasts that stood at the top of the food chain fell like raindrops, and their precious dragon blood stained the ground red. The war had only just begun, but it was already showing its unparalleled cruelty. This is a group of dragons. You've secretly prepared tens of thousands of dragons? Wren opened her mouth wide, and a look of disbelief appeared on her beautiful face. There's nothing to be surprised about. Your master is far more terrifying than you think. At the same time, he's also more far-sighted. He's not short-sighted and only has a little bit of pitiful power. Valeni glanced at Succubus and said in a mocking and disdainful tone, as a narrow-minded person, he would not forget how Wren had troubled him in the past. Now that he had the chance, he naturally wanted to take revenge. Are you being sarcastic, human? Human, Wren provoked in an unfriendly tone. Sarcastic? Valeni smiled and shook his head. No, I'm not being sarcastic. I'm just stating a fact. Remember, a servant's obligation is to obey his master's orders and not to act on his own. Damn it, you. Enough. Don't show your filthy and ugly behavior in front of me. Seeing that the two of them were about to fight, Zhang Cheng immediately pulled a long face and scolded in a deep voice. His eyes revealed a chilling light. Succubus was obviously shocked. He quickly lowered his head and shut his mouth. He didn't even dare to defend himself, for fear of receiving a terrible punishment. In contrast, Valeni raised the corner of his mouth and revealed a very subtle and proud smile, as if announcing his victory. Just as Doomsday Warden Polak was trying to say something to ease the tense atmosphere, the top of the fortress that was originally the lair of the corpse dragon in the sky suddenly began to fall off, revealing a strange device made of countless silver-gray metal rings. Before anyone could react, the device released a dazzling red light. The next second, boom! A terrifying energy wave exploded in the middle of the dragons. Then, no matter how hard the dragons flapped their wings, they couldn't maintain their altitude and struggled to fall down. Their bodies were tightly pressed against the ground, as if they were pressed down by an invisible force. Similarly, the soldiers fighting on the battlefield were also pressed to the ground by the invisible force field. They couldn't move at all. Some of the soldiers with weaker physiques even let out terrifying cracking sounds as their bones broke. Chapter 864. Gravity Control Device? What an unexpected surprise. Zhang Cheng raised his eyebrows in surprise. As a transcendent with a magic soul, he was far more sensitive to energy than most mages. He could immediately feel the energy change in the air. Obviously, the red light emitted from the top of the pyramid-shaped aerial fortress was the source of the change in gravity in the entire area. Although it seemed to have no difference on the surface, this sudden change actually wiped out the opponent's aerial advantage. In the battle just now, Zhang Cheng's dragon army had killed more than 80% of the skeletal dragons and was preparing to launch a second round of attacks on the demons on the battlefield. But at this moment, the change in gravity turned all of this into bubbles. They could only be bound to the ground and could not even fly. Master, I think we should immediately destroy that dangerous aerial fortress, Polak suggested with a terrifying green light in his eyes. Zhang Cheng nodded without hesitation. Of course. Start projecting the Hellfire puppets. Let me see if this thing can withstand the destruction of the big guys. Understood. The Doom Sentinel bowed slightly, and then roared at the MO-ARG engineers who were busy setting up the demonic cannons. Quick, move out. Put all the Hellfire puppets into the long-range projector. Aim at the enemy's aerial fortress and fire. Long-range projector is ready. Activate the Hellfire puppets. Adjust the angle. Fire. Accompanied by noisy shouts, large rocks burning with demonic flames streaked across the sky and smashed into the surface of the aerial fortress. Bang, 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 bang. When the green flames scattered in all directions, the big guys who had successfully boarded the fortress quickly woke up. They waved their sandbag-sized fists and began to recklessly unleash their innate destructive and murderous instincts. In the blink of an eye, a large number of bricks and internal structures were severely damaged, especially the device that controlled gravity at the top. Under the tearing of 4 or 5 Hellfire puppets, it quickly turned into a pile of scrap metal and lost its original function. Onyxia and Kulo Kelba were the first to sense that the gravity had returned to normal. They immediately let out angry roars, flapped their wings, and soared into the sky. They led the remaining children who were still alive and launched a frenzied attack on the front line of Hell's army. One of them wielded the innate power of the earth that a black dragon was born with. Wherever he passed, the ground would shake violently and even crack open a bottomless hole. The other possessed divinity, and its entire body flickered with violet light that symbolized arcane energy. It constantly unleashed terrifying large-scale damage spells at the densest areas of the enemy. With such terrifying killing efficiency, it didn't take long for them to clear out an empty space in the middle of the battlefield. The commanders of the Burning Legion naturally would not let go of such an opportunity. They immediately ordered the army to advance and continue pushing the battle line forward. In just over an hour, Hell's army began to retreat in defeat. There were even a few places that collapsed, and a large number of people were fleeing. Demons were not fools. Although they were cold, cruel, bloodthirsty, cunning, and evil, they cherished their lives very much. When they realized that they could not defeat their opponents, they would definitely choose to retreat strategically and not fight to the death like crazy. Have we won? Polak asked somewhat uncertainly. No, we haven't won yet. Zhang Cheng lightly shook his head. Are you kidding me? If hell only had this much foundation, then there was no value in conquering it. Moreover, the 6 demon kings who stood at the apex of power and authority had yet to show themselves. How could they win so easily? Just as Polak was about to say something, a large commotion suddenly appeared in the army of hell that was retreating in panic. Soon after, as though they had discovered something terrifying, not only did they stop retreating, they instead turned around and charged madly at the enemy. Their expressions and eyes were filled with fear, as though they were running away from something terrifying. Before the commanders of the Burning Legion could react to what was going on, a colossal creature that was 20 kilometers long and 10 kilometers wide emerged from the ground. Its body was so huge that even the Black Dragon Princess Onyxia looked tiny in front of it. It could be said that using any language to describe the monster in front of him was pale and inaccurate. Bichimo's behemoth? I always thought that this thing had gone extinct long ago. Voleni revealed a rarely seen expression of surprise. Bichimo's behemoth? Zhang Cheng's eyes flashed with a strange glint when he heard this term. Perhaps to those who had never read the Bible, Bichimo's was a very strange term. But if the other name of this monster was mentioned, it was believed that more than 50% of the people would be enlightened. That's right. Bichimo's had another name, the Behemoth. In the Bible, it was one of the monsters that God Yahweh created from clay on the 6th day of Genesis. The other one was the famous Leviathan. But in reality, these 2 monsters that had once caused indelible disasters to the forces of heaven were actually natives of hell. Needless to say, the latter was a rather powerful demon king for a very long time. The former, on the other hand, was a war behemoth that was rare in number but could grow without limit. When these behemoths were born, they were only the size of an adult. But after 10 or 20 years at most, they could grow to the size of a 10,000-ton tanker. And once they lived for hundreds or even thousands of years, their bodies would expand to such a spectacular sight. They only needed to open their mouths, and tens of thousands of unlucky fellows would be swallowed in an instant. I suggest that you get rid of it quickly. Otherwise, once it starts to go berserk, I'm afraid we won't even last half an hour, Voleni reminded with a solemn face. Does this thing have any weakness? Zhang Qing asked somewhat uncertainly. I'm sorry, Bichimo's has a very strong chaotic attribute. I can't pry into its past or future. But one thing I can be sure of is that it has an extremely strong vitality. According to the bits and pieces of information I've gathered, it took the combined efforts of 100,000 angels to kill a Bichimo's behemoth back then. Voleni told Xian everything he knew with a bitter smile. As he spoke, the corners of his mouth kept twitching. He obviously felt fear from the bottom of his heart. One must know that the reason why many mythical behemoths were so frightening was that they were extremely difficult to kill. Chapter 865. Roar. Accompanied by a deep roar, the Bichimo's behemoth brandished its terrifying sharp claws and cut through the advancing army like butter. At least 1/3 of the unlucky soldiers died on the spot, while the other 1/3 were either missing an arm or a leg. Whether it was the ferocious and brutal Lord of the Abyss or the other high-ranking demons in the army, none of them could resist the absolute advantage of strength brought about by its size. They were either killed immediately or chose to retreat at the first instance. Even the ground was cut open by this attack, and gullies more than 50 meters long were cut open. Purely in terms of physical attack, it was simply the limit of what a body of flesh and blood could achieve. What was even more frightening was that the Bichimo's beast wasn't just massive in size. Even after being bombarded by the evil energy cannons, its tough skin was at most a little mangled. Not to mention its internal organs. Even its muscles weren't damaged much. Evidently, as an out-and-out magical creature, the energy it absorbed over the years was basically stored in its flesh and blood, gradually forming an astonishing defensive ability. To put it in terms of the game, it was more or less an astonishing magic resistance. Seeing the army under his command being massacred and on the verge of collapse, Zhongqing finally couldn't help but curl up the corners of his mouth. He smiled and muttered to himself, "Unbelievable! What enormous vitality! What an astonishing form! This is something that truly suits my taste. What do you plan to do?" Volany seemed to have sensed something. He raised his head, a trace of fear in his eyes. "Of course I'm going to eat it. I believe you should know very well that I'm just an extraordinary life form disguised as a human, a monster that has fused countless bloodlines, abilities, and genes." Just as he finished speaking, Zhang Cheng put away his supreme authority and the black cylinder, leaping down from a high place and heading straight for the Bichimo's beast. The moment he landed on the ground, tens of millions of blood-red tentacles suddenly shot out from his body, piercing directly into the body of the beast and greedily absorbing its blood, energy, and vitality. In particular, a dozen of the thickest tentacles pierced the eyes of the beast and entered its brain along its optic nerves, greedily sucking the most essential part of its brain. Without a doubt, this was an ability extended from transplanting the Mind Flayer's main cells. By eating the brains of intelligent creatures, not only could he strengthen himself, but he could also seize the memories and knowledge stored in the target's brain. In just a few seconds, the giant beast shriveled at a speed visible to the naked eye. Although it struggled with all its might, wanting to kill this bug that was devouring its life, Zhang Cheng, who had long unleashed his potential, was no longer a simple human or dragon. Instead, he was a lunatic that was a mixture of too many life forms. In the end, he even completely gave up on his human form and turned into a ball wrapped in muscle tissue. Inside the ball was the brain, which acted as the center. As for the remaining bones, muscles, blood vessels, skin, hair, and so on, they were all decomposed and reassembled, turning into octopus-like tentacles that were deeply embedded in the giant beast's muscles and blood vessels. In the end, the gigantic beast finally exhausted all of its strength and fell to the ground with a rumble like a mountain, causing a strong earthquake. And its strong body became thinner and thinner, thinner and thinner. By the time Zhang Cheng returned to his human form, the Bichimos had completely disappeared. Not even a single bone was left behind. He used his actions to prove that he could really eat the monster that was said to require 100,000 angels to kill. Sensing the surging life force in his body, as well as the enhancement of his life essence, Zhang Cheng nodded in satisfaction. No rejection, no adverse reactions. It seems that the evolution potion I developed for myself has been successful. It must be known that cross-species genetic fusion was not an easy research topic to complete. Back then, in order to achieve this goal, he had personally conducted no less than tens of thousands of live experiments. The degree of cruelty was not inferior to the human experiments conducted by the Nazi scientists in the concentration camps during the Second World War. But now, it seemed that all the effort was worth it. In particular, the final test of the power of creation in the world of Harry Potter had finally perfected a crucial part of the entire complex formula. Now, any life form with a physical body and soul could be devoured and absorbed by Zhang Cheng, becoming a stepping stone on the path to perfect his own evolution. Just as he stood in the middle of the battlefield, silently savoring that indescribably wonderful feeling, a commotion suddenly broke out in the army of hell. Soon after, 6 powerful demons of different forms slowly walked out. Among them, the leader with a flaming horn took the initiative to take a step forward, shouting at the top of his voice, "Who are you? No, I should be asking what exactly is your home? I've never heard of a demon like you in hell. And your subordinates, although I can sense pure evil and chaos from them, I don't think they are known by any race of hell. However, it's obvious that they're not from any known race in hell." Another person with female characteristics also stood out. "Ha ha, who am I? Is that important?" Zhang Cheng laughed maniacally. After eating the Bichimo's behemoth, he felt the madness hidden under his rational appearance begin to stir restlessly, like a volcano that was about to erupt. Without asking, he knew that this was definitely the so-called chaos attribute acting up. As the name implied, chaos was without order and without restraint. It was a completely wild growth. It was like a trigger, gathering all those crazy thoughts that flashed through his mind and causing a strong impact on his subjective consciousness. But regrettably, these 6 demon kings who symbolized the highest point of hell's power and authority did not realize this point. The great demon with the flaming horn was obviously not satisfied with such an answer. Intense dissatisfaction appeared on his sinister face. Don't tell me you don't want to sit down and talk with us, but want to fight this war to the end? Talk. No, I don't think there's anything to talk about between us. Either give up everything and kneel down and submit, or be killed by me. There's no third option. Zhang Cheng grinned, rejecting the other party's invitation for negotiation without hesitation. He was one of those traditional demon kings born in hell who only wanted to rely on strength to dominate. Once the other party lowered their stance and submitted, he would magnanimously let bygones be bygones. On the contrary, he was a conqueror, a destroyer. He would never allow those who were once his enemies to continue preserving their strength, waiting for an opportunity to make a comeback in the future. Rather than that, he would rather destroy everything he had and rebuild from the ruins. Although this idea was very dangerous and extreme, he did not regret it in the slightest. Because stubbornness was an important factor for success. Only those who were stubborn enough could persevere on their own path and ultimately walk toward success. Chapter 866. The Angel Corps is still stationed at the border. Are you sure you want to fight a war where both sides suffer? The Demon King in the lead clearly did not understand the situation. His eyes revealed a trace of doubt and incomprehension. After all, according to the thousands of years of rules in hell, heaven was the greatest enemy, while internal strife was secondary. It was entirely possible to fight and negotiate. Unless there was a great disparity in strength between the two sides, it did not matter even if a war lasted for 80 to 100 years. After all, if one lost, one would admit defeat. In the eyes of demons, war was a game with rules. It was a means to achieve one's ambitions, just like how human societies competed with each other. But regrettably, Zhang Cheng did not intend to abide by this rule. He replied with a sneer, "What does the Angel Corps stationed at the border have to do with me? What makes you think this war will end with both sides suffering? No, I will kill all who resist and become the true king of hell. Then I will start a new round of war to conquer heaven. You are not a demon." Another demon king with 6 eyes keenly sensed that the soul of this unknown life form in human form was fundamentally different from that of a native of hell. His face was full of disbelief. "That's right. I am not a demon. On the contrary, I am a human, or at least I used to be. But now, I have abandoned my human identity and intend to evolve towards a higher level of life. Tell me, do you choose to submit, or do you choose to perish?" Zhang Cheng directly gave the ultimatum. He could sense that as time passed, the side effects of completely devouring the Bichimo's behemoth were starting to show. In particular, the hunger that seemed to never disappear, as well as the intense desire to destroy and destroy, constantly stimulating every nerve. Of course, this side effect was temporary. At most, it would take a few days to a week for the mental side effects to slowly subside and disappear. But the problem was that the side effects would continue for a period of time and would be very, very strong. Arrogant. You actually dare to challenge 6 demon kings at the same time. Who do you think you are? The most powerful demon king of the past, Satan? The greater demon, with flames burning on his horns, roared furiously. Perhaps we should teach him a lesson. The lizard-headed demon king drew his weapon and assumed a battle stance. For demons of hell who worshipped chaos, if there was a disagreement and no one could convince the other, then force would be the final solution. The winner would have everything. The loser would lose everything. It was simple yet violent, but the problem was that Zhang Cheng obviously liked this way. He opened his arms and said in a mocking tone, "Then what are you waiting for? Hurry up and start. Although, according to the original plan, I hope that this game can be played a little longer, but if you guys personally participate, ending it early is not unacceptable. Oh, I almost forgot. Before such an important battle, we should have a little warm-up and embellishment. Before anyone could react, how Rin spoke to the succubus on the high ground of the demonic cannons through telepathy. Your shadow sorcerers can make their move now. As you wish, my great and evil master. Rin immediately teleported to the mages who had been on standby for a long time and whipped the ground. Ha! Lowly fools. The master's order had arrived. Do your best to show me your strength. Remember, I want those people to kneel on the ground and tremble uncontrollably when they hear the name of the Shadow Wizards. Understood. Prepare the magic ritual. Third team, get into position. Second team, coordinate the energy. Connect the magic energy. Under the guidance and command of a few Aerita demon warlocks, a huge and shocking super spell was quickly completed. In the sky, black, ink-like clouds covered the entire battlefield. The next second, shadow arrows containing astonishing destructive power rained down from the sky, attacking the Infernal Legion from all directions. In less than 3 to 5 minutes, more than half of the soldiers were killed, and the rest looked pale as if they had been poisoned. They lay on the ground and vomited black, sticky blood. Although shadow energy was not as fierce as dark energy, it was very corrosive. Once touched, it would constantly distort and devour until the target died or was wiped out by a stronger force. As a special energy that came from the distortion of the void, shadow energy was very difficult to deal with. Just look at the ancient gods of Azeroth. If dark energy was an explosive that could destroy everything, then shadow energy was a variety of superbacteria and parasites that lurked in the body. You might be able to get rid of the explosive after death, but it would be very difficult to get rid of the bacteria and parasites in the body. What was more frightening was that shadow energy and death energy were very similar in nature. With just a little manipulation, the corpses that still had shadow energy could be awakened and become the living dead. Rin was very clear about this. So after the large-scale shadow arrows ended, she immediately performed a summoning ritual unique to Azeroth. Not long after, thousands of demons that had just been killed wobbled up and began to attack everything that was alive around them. Such a large-scale war and slaughter caused the death energy to boil in the entire area. The law of death was everywhere and constantly cheering, constantly stimulating Zhang Cheng's sensitive nerves. There was no doubt that after conquering hell, not only did he succeed in spreading dark energy and shadow energy throughout the world, but he also won the favor of death. This feels great. Everyone, are you satisfied with the warm-up I've arranged? Or should I say, who still thinks that I will fight a war where both sides will suffer? Zhang Cheng raised his supreme authority and looked at his opponent with a provocative gaze. Although in terms of energy level, he was not much stronger than the demon in front of him, but in terms of practical application and creation, he was at least 2 levels stronger than the demon in front of him. You lunatic! They had actually mercilessly slaughtered millions of evil demons. When the angel army hears this news, they will definitely choose to launch a full-scale invasion of hell. The demon with flaming horns roared loudly. That's exactly what I want. If those birdmen with wings were willing to die early, I would be more than happy to kill them all. Let me ask you one last time. Who among you wants to quit? As he spoke, Zhang Cheng narrowed his eyes and glanced at the 6 demons standing not far away, especially the 2 demons with female characteristics. After about 10 seconds of silence, the female demon with the coquettish appearance that made people involuntarily produce the most primitive desires and impulses took 2 steps back and said with a half-smile, I quit. I'm very sorry, guys. I think there is no need to continue this war. Chapter 867. Back out? Are you crazy? Damn it. Ekima, didn't you hear? He's not a demon at all, and he's not even a part of hell. He's an invader. That's right. Especially at times like this, we should unite and not scheme against each other for the sake of past grievances. Seeing cracks appearing in the originally strong alliance, the remaining 5 demon kings' expressions changed drastically. Some tried to comfort her, while others scolded her loudly. Obviously, in the demon's inherent mindset, if a powerful demon rose to become the Lord of Hell, they would subconsciously lower their stance and choose to accept and submit. But for an outsider, especially a human who was seen as a target to be conquered, they would never willingly give up resistance and would even defend their so-called dignity. It cannot be helped. Most of the time, the sense of superiority was a very inexplicable thing. It would ignore the objective facts of certain intelligent life, or even an entire race, forming a very subjective and hysterical stubbornness. For example, the white Europeans developed during the Age of Discovery. For a long time, they thought that other races and civilizations in the world were primitive and barbaric, only worthy of being killed and robbed as slaves. Even in the 18th century, Americans could still use guns to kill Native Americans without any psychological burden and cut off their scalps in exchange for a bounty. Another example was Japan, which experienced a short period of rise, actually stupidly interpreted the advantage of being the first to complete industrialization over Asia, which was still in the process of agriculture, as a permanent advantage of race and civilization. For some reason, almost all intelligent life had similar attributes, and demons were no exception. Zhang Cheng enjoyed this show of betrayal with great interest. After a while, he smiled and said, "Madam, you're different from these arrogant idiots. You've made the right choice. No, you don't understand. I didn't say that I'm going to submit to you. I'm just withdrawing from this dangerous battle. If you win in the end, I'll naturally worship you as my lord. But if you lose, I'll stab you without hesitation to ensure that I won't be punished." Akima licked her lips and spoke of her plan. He had to admit that she was indeed very cunning. She began to bet on both sides after realizing that the situation was not good. No matter which side won in the end, she would be able to keep her power and status. "It doesn't matter. It doesn't make any difference to me. In fact, this war has already ended with the destruction of your army. Next, I will show you the power of the Lord of Hell." He blurted out the last word. Zhang Cheng's body suddenly swelled up, turning into a huge dragon with a dozen heads. He breathed out a series of dragon breaths, including fire, acid, ice, lightning, and so on. Boom! When the different types of energy converged at one point, a terrifying energy wave erupted. In just a short moment, where the 6 demon kings were, something like a black hole appeared, devouring everything around it. Regardless of whether it was an unlucky person who was accidentally attracted to it, or all kinds of sand and stones, all of them would disappear without a trace. Fortunately, the Demon King was the Demon King after all. After noticing that the situation was not good, he immediately cast a teleportation spell and left the dangerous area. He narrowed his eyes and observed the drastic changes between the different energies in the air, simultaneously controlling more than 10 types of energy. It's unbelievable. Akima's pupils shrank, and she muttered to herself in a voice that only she could hear. As she had clearly indicated that she would withdraw, she was not too worried that she would be attacked. She stood at the side and observed the attacks of the dragons from afar. With his precise control over the various types of magical energies, the dragon breaths spewed out by each attribute head would produce different changes when they intersected with the dragon breaths of the other attribute heads. This also meant that those who were attacked would not be able to use defensive spells of a single attribute to block the direct damage of the dragon breaths. What was even more terrifying was that when all the energy converged at one point, the essence of the energy would undergo a qualitative upgrade. It would directly shatter time and space, forming a black hole with a huge gravitational force. All matter that was trapped in it would disappear without a trace, without exception. Of course, the other demon kings were not to be trifled with either. They all used their trump cards and began to retaliate. Unfortunately, like most of the greater demons, their energy attributes were very simple. Be it physical or magical attacks, they could not pose much of a threat to the dragon that Zhang Cheng had transformed into. Instead, they were forced to retreat. One of the greater demons, who sensed that the situation was not good, wanted to escape, but he was caught and thrown to the ground. Then, Thousands of tentacles swarmed over and sucked him dry. Without a doubt, Zhang Cheng was devouring the most powerful beings in hell and using their powerful genes to improve himself. In order to successfully devour the light orbs, he had to strengthen his body at all costs to prevent himself from being unable to absorb too much energy throughout the process. "Bastard! This lunatic wants to eat us," one of the greater demons reminded loudly with gritted teeth. As a demon king who stood at the peak of power and authority in hell, he could not accept that a being of the same race as him would become someone's food so easily, especially when this being claimed to be a human. Anger, humiliation, helplessness. In less than half an hour of fighting, the terrain near the center of the battlefield had undergone tremendous changes. The originally boundless plains were now filled with deep pits that were more than 200 meters deep. They were either filled with hot lava or formed into bone-chilling ice caves. Under the effect of powerful magical powers, the environment here had been permanently changed. Anyone who had a little understanding of energy could clearly feel the invincible strength of the multi-headed dragon that could crush everything. Not only could it absorb and transform energy without restraint, it could also store it and release it at the opponent. As long as the magical energy of hell was not exhausted, the power of the dragon was unlimited. What was even more terrifying was that all magical attacks would be quickly turned into the purest energy after coming into contact with the dragon's scales. Yes, relying on his deep understanding and application of alchemy, Zhang Cheng made all magical and spell-like abilities useless. He was like a player with a cheat code, toying with these high and mighty demon kings of hell until one of them could not take it anymore and had a mental breakdown. Only then would he devour them. As mentioned before, this was not a battle at all. Instead, it was the Lord of Hell showing off his power to his subjects, or blatantly issuing a threat to those who submit to him and prosper. Chapter 868. Millions of demons in the demonic metropolis had witnessed the collapse of the infernal army and the humiliation, torture, and devouring of the 5 demon lords. Especially when a demon lord was eaten, the multi-headed dragon would grow a head that possessed the power attribute of the demon lord. It was a bit shocking. When the last demon king was sucked dry, Zhang Cheng, who was in his dragon form, finally transformed into a tall demon. He stared with his deep eyes and asked, shouldn't you fulfill your promise now?" "Of course. My name is Ekima, the direct descendant of the first demon lord of lust, Asmodeus, one of the 6 demon lords of hell, the lord of the land of lingering joy. I hereby pledge my loyalty to you. From now on, you are the true lord of hell, the demon lord of the demon lords." Ekima knelt on one knee as she expressed her stance in a very formal tone. In this place where power reigned supreme, it was never a shameful thing to submit to a life form that was more powerful than oneself. On the contrary, it was a sign of maturity and rationality, and an eternal truth that demons generally recognized. "Very good. I like your intelligence, and I also recognize your title and territory. But before that, you must accept a new power, a power called dark energy. Since the end of the ancient war, hell has been in decline for too long, and many have forgotten the glory and power of the past. But now, I will lead you to reclaim this lost glory. Yes, I will conquer heaven." Zhang Cheng did not hide his surging ambition and desire as he reached out his right hand and released a large amount of green dark energy. In just a few minutes, a huge pool of dark energy had formed within a radius of 1,000 meters around him. Dark energy. Ekima undoubtedly felt the terrifying power of the green liquid energy as she carefully poured a little into her mouth. Instantly, the unbearable pain was transmitted to her brain through her nerves as she fell into the pool of dark energy as her body convulsed uncontrollably. Soon, as a large amount of dark energy surged into her body, the female great demon finally got up slowly. A layer of mysterious green patterns covered her skin as her pupils turned from red to dark green. She stretched her body that had nearly doubled in size as she spread her wings and flew over the demonic metropolis as she shouted to the demons below in a magnetic voice. Subjects of hell, what are you waiting for? Why don't you kneel and worship the new Lord of Hell, the demon lord of the demon lords? Didn't you hear that he will lead you to defeat your enemy and conquer heaven? Conquer heaven. A demon licked his lips as a look of excitement appeared on his face. There was no demon would not desire to defeat their enemy. There were even some creepy customs in hell, such as using the skull of an angel as a wine cup, or using the feathers of an angel's wings as a cushion under the mattress. There were also some powerful lords who would buy living angel captives at a high price and imprison them in the dungeon as slaves to vent their lust and violence until they could no longer bear the humiliation and chose to commit suicide. Just like the saying goes, once hatred begins, it will never end. It would be like a thorn that was deeply embedded in one's heart. The slightest touch would immediately trigger a violent reaction. This was also why, on many occasions, a few words or two slogans could incite countless people and make them hate the enemies who had once harmed them. Lord of Hell, Lord of Hell, Lord of Hell, conquer heaven, conquer heaven, conquer heaven. Under the deliberate guidance of Akima, the ordinary demons who were still a little afraid quickly fell into a state of madness. 1 spread to 10, 10 to 100, 100 to 1,000, and 1,000 to 10,000. In less than 10 minutes, the entire demonic metropolis was filled with fanatical shouts that could be heard clearly even from a few kilometers away. Zhang Cheng saw this and nodded in satisfaction. He went straight to the sky above the city and announced loudly through a voice transmission spell, "Subjects, do you see the huge green energy pool outside the city? Jump in and accept its baptism. Only the powerful demons who have been baptized are qualified to follow me into battle. Conquer heaven. Come, the powerful evil energy is waiting for you. Ard, power. I want power to praise you, the great Lord of Hell." The demons in the city quickly opened the city gates and rushed into the huge, evil energy pool outside as they greedily absorbed the twisted, violent, and corrupted energy. Some of the unlucky ones could not withstand the violent energy and their bodies exploded. Some of them survived the baptism and became stronger than before. Some even awakened their spell-casting talent on the spot. Enjoying the chaotic scene below, Ekima pursed her lips and said sarcastically, "This is what you want, isn't it? That's right. I want to integrate the power of hell and turn it into a true war machine, an invincible army." Zhang Cheng didn't hide his intentions in the slightest and nodded expressionlessly. "So next, you will destroy the original territorial system and put every demon into the army. I have to admit, to a certain extent, you are indeed an ambitious Lord of Hell." Akima commented meaningfully. "But I'm a little curious. What is your purpose behind conquering hell and heaven?" "Of course it is for the future. Don't you feel it? The world we live in is in a very special period, an era that is about to go berserk. Heaven, hell, and the human world will not be spared. What I am doing is to prepare for a rainy day, and as much ammunition as possible to prepare for the possible war." Zhang Cheng gave a half-truth explanation. Near the evil energy pool, the officers of the Burning Legion had begun to test the demons who had been transformed by the dark energy and divided them into corresponding teams according to their talents for training. At the same time, a group of abyssal lords and dreadlords led their men into the city and captured those who were unwilling to accept the transformation and forced them to drink the green energy that contained the dark energy. Obviously, compared to the bewitching words, this was more like an organized and premeditated ethnic cleansing. Those who accepted the dark energy could live and become a member of the new hell, and those who could not bear would naturally explode on the spot, and no resources would be consumed. After the integration was complete, there would probably be few native demons in the entire area, and they would be replaced by the Burning Legion soldiers who used dark energy. Chapter 869. Some people said that the art of conquering and ruling was like drawing a pie. Regardless of whether the final result could be realized or not, The first thing to do was to draw a big pie on the paper so that the easily incited people at the bottom would have strong expectations driven by hope. Obviously, to the hell demons, the easiest pie to excite them was naturally to defeat their archenemy, heaven, and trample on those angels who claim to represent justice, kindness, and all kinds of beautiful feelings. Therefore, using the loud slogan of conquering heaven, Zhang Cheng did not spend too much effort to establish a stable regime with Demonic City as the center. Although there were still many demon lords guarding their own territories and tried to unite to not acknowledge the birth of the new Lord of Hell. But it would not take long before the army that had replenished its troops would make them understand how naive and laughable this idea was. As a monster with a strong desire to dominate, how could Zhang Cheng allow someone to non-violent non-cooperation under his nose? He directly gave the order to massacre. Yes, all the territories that did not go to Demonic City to swear allegiance within the stipulated time were all blacklisted by the Abyss Lords. It was believed that with their desire for slaughter, destruction, and destruction, they would definitely slaughter all the rebellious territories and then hand them over to the Fear Demon King or the Shadow Mages to make them into undead creatures without thoughts. To a certain extent, Zhang Cheng's dark and tyrannical style of doing things was indeed in line with the demons' appetites, be it the Hell Demons or the Burning Legion's demons. This was also why they quickly accepted a guy who looked like a human as their boss. With the entire Hell under their control, the war machine led by the Burning Legion's high-ranking commanders was fully activated. They would not let go of anything of value and turned it into war resources, preparing to throw it into the next war to conquer heaven. Of course, such a large-scale operation naturally could not be hidden from the angels stationed at the border. Evra, I think we're in big trouble. After so long, Hell has finally been unified under the command of a powerful demon king once again. If nothing goes wrong, a new round of war will break out soon. A beautiful and solemn female angel stared at the image transmitted by the magic mirror, her tone full of worry. A new round of war? No way. Didn't those demons just fight a civil war and have millions of casualties? The male angel called Evra widened his eyes, as if he could not believe that the situation would develop in such a terrible way. The female angel shook her head with a bitter smile. No, you're still too young to understand hell and demons. Perhaps from our point of view, after such heavy casualties, we should rest and recuperate, at least until the population recovers to a certain extent. However, their thoughts were the exact opposite, especially the ambitious new Lord of Hell. He definitely wouldn't give us too much time. So I have a mission for you now. Go back and report the situation to the Archangel immediately. Understood. Don't worry, I'll pass on everything I see and hear to the Archangel. The male angel bowed deeply, then flapped his pure white wings and quickly rose into the air. It didn't take long for him to leave the military camp at the border. However, he didn't follow his superior's instructions and head straight for heaven. Instead, he took a big detour and quietly returned to Hell. After confirming that no one was following them, the male angel immediately removed his disguise, revealing his sharp claws, horns, and large bat wings. There is no doubt that this was not an angel at all, but a dreadlord disguised as an angel. To be precise, it was a dreadlord who swallowed this poor new angel and used his identity to sneak into heaven to gather information. As the best life form in the universe of Azeroth, dreadlords could use their innate ability to imitate the appearance of many species, even the special energy they used. One dreadlord even successfully transformed into a paladin, inciting the Scarlet Crusade to attack the undead scourge that betrayed the Burning Legion. Therefore, disguising as a low-level angel was easier than eating and drinking. After all, it wasn't only hell that had become dull after tens of thousands of years of peace, but heaven as well. Especially with the continuous infiltration of human religion and society. The angels once shouted the slogan of building a heaven on earth, planning to merge heaven and earth into one at some point in time. Unfortunately, this plan did not succeed in the end and was completely destroyed by a madman called Faust. However, With thousands of years of gradually cultivated arrogance, the angels did not realize that they had begun to go downhill. They still felt that whether it was the supreme council of the human world or their old enemy, hell, they were no match for them. After returning to his original appearance, the Dreadlord quickly found an area with relatively stable magic energy, cast a teleportation spell, and disappeared. Because the energy attributes of heaven and hell were opposite to each other, many places were very unfriendly to spellcasters. The slightest carelessness could lead to disastrous consequences. Unless they found an area with stable energy, people with a little bit of rationality would not choose to cast spells. At the same time, Queen of Succubus, Rin, was lying in the basement of the Magic City Palace, drinking hellish wine brewed with fresh blood while flipping through the information sent by her subordinates. Just as she was about to turn over and change into a more comfortable position, the Dreadlord finally came through the portal and appeared in an empty space in the room. Without any hesitation, this sinister and cunning fellow immediately got down on one knee and greeted her in a very respectful tone. "Good evening, Your Majesty. I've just received an important piece of news. The leader of the Angel Corps has realized that we are about to launch an attack." "Oh, what do they know?" Rin put down the cup, her eyes revealing undisguised viciousness. "They know that a new Lord of Hell has appeared. At the same time, they concluded that it won't be long before we start an all-out war with Heaven." The Dreadlord answered without hesitation. Master was right. The one who understands you the most will always be your enemy. It doesn't matter. Anyway, even if they know, they can't stop the army from conquering. Go back and continue to hide. If there are any new movements, report to me immediately." After saying that, Succubus gently waved his hand, indicating that the Dreadlord could leave. "As you wish," the Dreadlord bowed and then cast a teleportation spell to return to the border. He disguised himself as an angel and planned to enter Heaven's most heavily guarded cloud city to do a little investigation.